Ксенечка, я люблю тебе.
Hear my plea to the fallen, leave me to be with the broken one last time before I go. Hold the last burning ember, let us never surrender. May rise up to the glory and the fall. For the weak and the broken, for the lost and forsaken, let us never surrender. May we rise up to the fall. For the weak and the broken, for the lost and forsaken, let us never surrender. For the glory of the fall. For the beat and the broken, for the lost and forsaken, let us never surrender. Now we rise unto the call.
All right, Orc Hunters, check on into the stream here for September 21st, 2022. I'm Andy Mercado from Mercado Media. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. Thank you for the super chats coming in from Christine. We already got a $20 super chat coming in. Steve with a $27 super chat, making the chat light up over on YouTube. Thank y'all so much. We are live here with day 211 of the war in Ukraine, as the biggest news of the day is Vladimir Putin has announced mobilization of 300,000 reservists to go die in Ukraine. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into the full map breakdown. I got lots of video to go through today, including Putin's entire speech. We're going to listen to it. It's got an English dub. We got to hear what he says from his mouth and the reasoning why he's mobilizing 300,000 reservists to fight. Russians are fleeing Russia. The fighting age males are being refused at the border, so they're being turned away. Also, they're being arrested if they're trying to flee Russia. There's been mass arrests within protests in Russia today, in which they're being just left at the police station and being conscripted into the Russian military and having to go fight within Ukraine Ukraine. Lots of things have changed. Lots of things have happened today. Not much has changed on the map in Ukraine, but we're going to get into that as well. If y'all could hit the like button on Facebook, like the video on YouTube, make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube channel so you get all updates and notifications and the bell. Follow the page on Facebook, all of that stuff. We're going to get into it right away here. So the first biggest update of the day is Putin orders partial military call-up, sparking protests. Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered a partial mobilization of reservists Wednesday to bolster his forces in Ukraine, a deeply unpopular move that sparked rare protests across the country that led to almost 1,200 arrests. The risky order follows humiliating setbacks for Putin's troops nearly 7 months after they invaded Ukraine. The first such call-up in Russia since World War II. The only 2 times in history Russia has ordered a mobilization, because again it's been a volunteer force being sent into Ukraine to this point. The previous 2 times Russia has ordered a mobilization has been World War I in 1914 and then World War II to fight the Nazis in 1941. So this is the 3rd time to go fight and mobilize. The first such call-up in Russia since World War II heightened tensions with Ukraine's Western backers, who derided it as an act of weakness and desperation. The move also sent Russians scrambling to buy plane tickets to flee the country. In his 14-minute nationally televised address, Putin also warned the West that he isn't bluffing about using everything as his disposal to protect Russia, in apparent reference to his nuclear arsenal. He has previously rebuked NATO countries for resupplying weapons to Ukraine. Confronted with steep battlefield losses, expanding front lines, and a conflict that has raged longer than expected, the Kremlin has struggled to replenish its troops in Ukraine, reportedly even resorting to widespread recruitment within prisons, which we have seen. We saw Prigozhin, Putin's hot dog boy, the owner of the private military contractors Wagner Group, has already been in gulags recruiting civilian prisoners to go and be conscripted into the Russian military. The total number of reservists to be called up could be as high as 300,000, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu had said. However, Putin's decree authorizing the partial mobilization, which took effect immediately, or offered few details, raising suspicions that the draft could be broadened at any moment. Notably, one clause was kept a secret. So I have Putin's full address to the nation, which we'll watch, but I'm going to pull up some of the responses to Putin's mobilization order and some of the protests that have been taking place within Moscow and other cities in Russia. And these protesters are being arrested and then sent to Ukraine to go fight for Russia. It's very a disgusting situation. Anti-mobilization protesters have gathered in Moscow and other cities across Russia to protest Putin's announcement of conscription of reservists to fight a war in Ukraine. Here's from Sky News. Let me start that over. A couple of seconds of audio there. Here we go.
As you can see here, pretty dramatic scenes, and bear in mind we haven't seen protests in cities for the last 5 or 6 months. People have been so scared of the fact that they will be detained, and that is clearly what is happening. But this mobilization announcement has brought people out onto the streets here in Moscow, in Yekaterinburg, in various other cities across the country, and police are dealing with them very brutally. And it is extraordinary actually to see how brave people are being, to hear them chanting no to war, nie vojna, and to brave the police reaction. You can see that reaction. I'm not saying that everybody in this country is against this partial mobilization. I've been out on the streets talking to people today, and some people, especially the older generation, are saying this is what we have to do. We have to save the people of Donbass, and they soak up Vladimir Putin's rhetoric. But there are people, as you can see here now, who don't agree with this, who are worried about this escalation, who don't want to have to go and fight. And of course, this is something that the Kremlin has avoided. They have said this entire duration, the last 7 months, that they are not considering a partial or a full mobilization. And then lo and behold, Just 2 weeks, essentially, after that Ukrainian counteroffensive, President Putin makes the announcement. He says he's going to partially mobilize for now. The defense minister says it's just 300,000 men. Well, that's a considerable number of men. It won't necessarily be the panacea that he might hope it can be. It will take time to train those men up. It will take time to rotate them in. Winter is coming. But it is a considerable
Winter is coming.
Number to send in, and of course once you've gone for partial mobilization you can also always raise those numbers. It will only be the Ministry of Defense who's counting. So this is an escalation. Let's just turn around again and see what's going over there. And of course then you had those nuclear threats from Vladimir Putin. We've heard them before. We had just at the start of this him putting the nuclear forces on alert. But to say, to blame the West for nuclear blackmail, which is what he did, to say that NATO members were raising the spectre, the prospect of a nuclear war, which they are not, and then to threaten and say that Russia's arsenal in its entirety would be used to defend the motherland, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the motherland, and then to say, I am not bluffing. I think from a fairly paranoid leader of a powerful nuclear state, those are warnings that we do have to take seriously.
And Diana, you make the point that this is just a partial mobilization that's been announced. And are the scenes around you, is this why Vladimir Putin was keen to avoid a mass mobilization?
Absolutely. This always carried a political risk. He knew that there is a difference between sending people in to fight who have signed a contract saying that they want to fight for the money, and then forcing young men, just because they have done military service at one time and developed particular skills, to go and fight even if they don't want to. We are now in a situation where we will be seeing that, and it's not only just young men, it is men up to 50, 55, who, if they have the particular skills, will be sent into Ukraine. And I think that is why they were hesitant to take this step for a very long time. And that is why Ukraine and many countries in the West say this is an act of desperation on the part of Vladimir Putin rather than any signal of strength.
And that is exactly true. I was going to get to that if she didn't mention that. Credit to Sky News reporting Diana McNay for that report on the ground in Moscow. More of a response to Ukraine's successes within the war, more so than a show of strength from Russia. Because, I mean, here's the map, and we'll get into a full map breakdown here. We're just going to get into some more of the protests that are taking place. And you can see the amount of space just within the last few weeks that Ukraine has been able to take back. They did this in 3 days. But now we're about 3 weeks in. Ukraine is closing in the gap over here. They're still advancing with their counteroffensives in the east. They're connecting space. Yesterday, there was still some Russian-controlled territory here. We're going to get into it. Yarova and Drobchevy are the two latest cities that have been liberated by Ukrainian forces. So Ukraine is still advancing up into Luhansk. They're still very much on the offensive here. They're crossing the Oskol River in multiple places. They're able to get across to this eastern front and close gap in on the rest of this Kharkiv Oblast here, the strip of land. And they're already hitting targets within the Russian front line of Luhansk. It's already the Ukrainian forces, and again we'll get into all this. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but just to this escalation that Russia has brought on is more of like a cope than it is a show of strength, because they're only having successes in 2 parts of the country, and that is Bakhmut, and that's on maybe a once or twice a weekly basis, in which they'll take a couple city blocks around Bakhmut and to the south of Bakhmut, or maybe in Pisky they'll gain a couple city blocks in Pisky a couple times a week. Very slow and atrocious rate of advancement, but this is the territory in which Russia's advancing, just in this pocket here. So lots of escalation coming from a failing military, a failing Vladimir Putin within Ukraine, and this next step to conscript up to 300,000 troops, reservists, to go die in Ukraine. Because you got to realize it's going to take these conscripts, the ones that live, at least a couple months, and this is on a good giving them the benefit of the doubt, if you will, like a month. And that's benefit of the doubt of combat to be able to be trained. Most of them aren't going to make it through a month to be able to be the Russian conscripts. They're not going to make it through a month to be able to be combat trained. Whereas Ukraine's soldiers, they've been holding it down now for years and years, and they have combat experience. The most of the high tech, high powered Russian equipment has already been destroyed. They've lost 50,000 of their combat trained troops already. Russia is sending people to go die in Ukraine at this point. Just numbers for Ukraine's artillery at this point. Excuse me about that, I hit the wrong button. Here's some more from the protests that are taking place. In Moscow, Russia, the police are detaining protesters against the mobilization at an unauthorized protest rally taking place tonight. The protester who is being detained is chanting no to war. You know, it is those that are out there, little act of bravery now, but some could say too little, too late. Now, these protests started and were immediately stopped, like in the same night when the invasion began. It's been 6 months. There has been nothing from the Russian people in general. Granted, yes, if they speak out, they'll be immediately gulagged and likely conscripted into Ukraine. Lots of avenues of argument within this here. They're saying no to war. So more video from the protests in Moscow. In Moscow, Russia, police are detaining protesters against the mobilization. So that's the protesters. This is the orc hunters, by the way. Some of y'all shouting out the wrong community. This is the orc hunters. So more from the protests in the streets of Moscow. No to war. No to war. Here's more. In Krasnoyarsk in eastern Russia, residents joined a protest march against the war mobilization announced earlier today. Media report that the police detained some 30 people. This is in eastern Russia. Krasnoyarsk. So mass protests, mass arrests continue. And then again, here's just an idea of Russia's losses within Ukraine to this point, so you can get an idea of the cope that is taking place from both pro-Russian ideologues, Putin himself, the Kremlin. They've lost over 50,000 troops as of September 21st. This is in 6 months within Ukraine. Give you an idea, the United States, we lost a little over 7,000 in 21 years in the war on terror, in the war we fought, right? This recent war, which I was a part of. I got deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom in 2012. We lost 7,000 in 21 years. Russia has lost 55,110 in 6 months. So these 300,000 conscripts are going to be more cannon fodder for Ukraine. And the West has already said that if Russia continues with this acts of aggression and they continue these annexation attempts, which we're going to get into as well, and some of these cities that are occupied by Russian forces, there's going to be a response from the West. And there's still plenty of equipment that Ukraine can receive from Western militaries, like stronger tanks, stronger air power. The Ukraine already has air superiority over Russia. Russia's air power is completely nothing right now at this point. So it wouldn't be difficult to send Ukraine some A-10s, some Blackhawks, give them some M1 Abrams. We've already been sending them MRAPs. So it's going to be a response. This is all definitely an escalation within the war in Ukraine. It definitely is. Here's President Biden spoke at the United Nations, and here is his speech, and then appreciation from the ambassador to Ukraine. The UN Charter is an act of dauntless hope, he said. Ukraine's hope lies in the shared global values of freedom and respect. Putin's imperial ambitions are incompatible with the UN Charter. Russia has no place at the global leadership table.
Again, just today, President Putin has made overt nuclear threats against Europe and a reckless disregard for the responsibilities of the non-proliferation regime. Now, Russia's calling up more soldiers to join the fight, and the Kremlin is organizing a sham referenda to try to annex parts of Ukraine, an extremely significant violation of the UN Charter. This world should see these outrageous acts for what they are. Putin claims he had to act because Russia was threatened. But no one threatened Russia, and no one other than Russia sought conflict. In fact, we warned it was coming, and with many of you we worked to try to avert it. Putin's own words make his true purpose unmistakable. Just before he invaded, Putin asserted, and I quote, "Ukraine was created by Russia and never had, quote, real statehood." And now we see attacks on schools, railway stations, hospitals, on centers of Ukrainian history and culture. In the past, even more horrifying evidence of Russia's atrocity and war crimes. Mass graves uncovered in Izium, bodies, according to those who excavated those bodies, showing signs of torture. This war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state, plain and simple, and Ukraine's right to exist as a people. Whoever you are, wherever you live, whatever you believe, that should make your blood run cold.
So a rare, in my opinion, strong speech from Biden there from the United Nations, being pretty direct about the annexations attempts in Ukraine from Russia. Here's more from Biden. Permanent member of the United Nations Security Council invaded a neighbor. Russia has shamelessly violated the core tenets of the United Nations Charter.
A permanent member of the United Nations Security Council invaded its neighbor, attempted to erase the sovereign state from the map. Russia has shamelessly violated the core tenets of the United Nations Charter. No more important than the clear prohibition against countries taking the territory of their neighbor by force. Again, just today, President Putin has made overt nuclear threats against Europe and a reckless disregard for the responsibilities of the non-proliferation regime. Now, Russia's calling up more soldiers to join the fight, and the Kremlin is organizing a sham referenda to try to annex parts of Ukraine, an extremely significant violation of the UN Charter.
And then we saw the second portion of that speech before this one. So just some rhetoric, some direct rhetoric from President Biden on the actions of President Vladimir Putin within Ukraine. Now let's listen to Putin's speech, because the trolls are going to be like, listen to Putin's whole speech, blah, blah, blah. So that's what we're going to do. So we're listening to it, ironically, to analyze what he's saying and understand any of these motivations, and that way we can pick them apart. Like, we got to do that. That's part of the process. Got to know what he says unedited, so we can pick it apart ourselves and not hear it from another person, and then it's like third hand information. We can hear it ourselves. So here's Vladimir Putin's speech for full mobilization with an English dub, so we don't have to listen to the Russian on it.
Cannon fodder and push them into the war with our country, having started it already in 2014, using the army against the civilian population and organizing the genocide and blockade and terror against the people who refused to acknowledge the Ukrainian power as a result of the military coup. As usual, they refused to have a peaceful solution of resolving Donbas problems and started claiming the right to use of nuclear weapons. It became clear as before, the second time the large offensive of the Donbas is even inevitable. And the decision of the preemptive military operation was the only decision possible and absolutely necessary. And the main aim of freeing the whole of the territory of Donbas remains without change.
That's why they've taken 3 nuclear power plants, talking about the fear of nuclear problems. Well, they've militarily taken over 3 nuclear plants, including Chernobyl, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and another thermonuclear power plant a little bit further into the east of Zaporizhzhia, and their military has a hold over it. Also wild that a common rhetoric of the invasion of the Ukraine, bombing the civilians of the east of Ukraine, which Russian troops were in the east of Ukraine since 2014, training the militias there. They had the front lines, they had trenches dug. Also, if it was only just about the eastern Russian-speaking Ukrainians, why did the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Russians invade the northern region of Ukraine? Why was there Russian troops? All this green space up here used to be red. It was Russian troops up here, up near the capital city of Kyiv. They were right on the outskirts. The Russian troops are right down the street in Kyiv at one point at the zoo. We were watching it live. We watched the CNN. The CNN had a feed up. They were doing all types of things. Like they were fearing that the city was going to be taken. Right? There was a real fear of that happening. So talking about the Russian-speaking Russians in the east, and it's all about the Donbas and blah blah blah. Then why were there Russians in the capital? Why were there Russians anywhere close to this? Why are there Russians in the south? Why are there Russians in the Crimean Peninsula? It's not about the Russian speakers in the east. They're trying to take Ukraine for themselves and make the Soviet Union great again. That's the best way to put it. Like a good comparison. Vladimir Putin wants to make the Soviet Union great again, make it come back together. It's just complete garbage. So let's continue.
The main aim of freeing the whole of the territory of Donbas remains without change. The Donbas People's Republic is almost fully cleared of the Nazis. The fight in the Donetsk People's Republic continue, and the occupation regime has made a deep line of defense, and therefore the part of our army and the Donbas military.
Notice how he's referring to Ukraine, which is a sovereign country, as the occupation force within its own country. He's referring to the Ukrainians as the occupation. This is somebody that lives in a completely different realm of universe. It's not even like just completely not true.
Units are using the technology, using the people, and are freeing Donetsk People's Republic step by step, freeing the towns and villages, and helping people who were turned into hostages by the Kiev regime. As you know, the professional army serving under contract are taking part in the special military operation.
The professional army.
However, the volunteer units are fighting alongside them. They have different nationalities, professions, and ages. They are true patriots. They are protecting Russia and Donbas upon the call of their hearts. In this regard, the Ministry of Defense was
They don't even want to fight in other places. The DNR and the LNR only want to fight within their own oblast. LNR fighters are refusing to go fight in Donbas, and DNR fighters are refusing to go fight in Luhansk. They're not wanting to go fight for each other. And when he's talking about the professional units, he's referring to the Wagner private military contractors. That's who he's referring to. He isn't even referring to his own.
Instructed by me in full to determine as soon as possible the legal status of those areas and also the units of Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics. They have to be the same as the professional military of the Russian army, including the social guarantees, medical and financial supplies. We need to pay special attention to procurement for the units of the Donbas by technology and munitions, and our army based on the decisions.
So it's a technology and ammunitions, not entrepreneurships. That's a bad translation there. So he's talking about rearming, re-equipping the units within the East and the Donbass, so like the LNR and the DNR.
Of the Ministry of Defense and the General Command have freed from the neo-Nazis the considerable territories of Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. As a result, there is a long line of military contact, over 1,000 kilometers. And I want to say that publicly for the first time, after the start of the special military operation, also at the Istanbul negotiations, there was a very positive reaction to our proposals concerning ensuring the security of Russia. But it was obvious that the West was not happy with the peaceful decision. So after reaching certain compromises, they effectively were given a direct order to undermine the negotiations. And the Kiev regime started using new bands of foreign mercenaries and nationalists. And the army trained by NATO.
Keep in mind, Russia and Ukraine did have peace talks going between themselves. I don't know, he's talking about peace talks with Istanbul and saying that the NATO undermined that, which is just ridiculous. Ukraine and Russia were doing peace talks, and the Ukrainian leaders got on a helicopter and flew to a location in Russia in Belarus to go have peace talks. And immediately afterwards, and it was specifically about the residents in Mariupol, trying to get the residents out. And immediately after the peace talks, nearly every time the Russians would mine or hit the evacuation route with artillery, leaving Mariupol before the Azovstal steel plant became like an Alamo position. Back when the Ukrainians still had some kind of control over Mariupol, it's just lies.
Standards and actually commanded by the Western commanders. The repression regime intensified across the whole of Ukraine against its own citizens after the military coup in 2014. The politics of terror and intimidation against Russia becomes more and more barbaric and terrible. I want to stress that most people living in the territories freed from the neo-Nazis, and first of all, they are the Novorossiya historic lands. We're talking Kherson, Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye regions. You have seen the barbarities of the neo-Nazis in the regions captured by them. The Banderas followers and the Nazi mercenaries are torturing the peaceful citizens in Donetsk, Lugansk, People's Republics.
He doesn't even stay on point with his rhetoric. It's just to just pound you with nonstop words. Like, this is the type. It's not just him too. There's plenty of people like this, where he's just like hitting you with word salad. Like, he was just talking about Kherson. How does he go from Kherson and Zaporizhia to Donbass in like 2 seconds? Those are not even close to each other. And why I continue to tell y'all that locations and geography is important, because if you just miss that word salad, you'll be like, damn, are those three in the same spot? Those three aren't even close to each other. Here's, again, I'll go into a map breakdown. We're not there yet because this is a lot of big news. But Kherson, here's Zaporizhia, which is in Ukraine control. Russia doesn't have control of Zaporizhia. That's still in Ukrainian control. And then in Donbass, that's over here. Donbass takes up more than just, this is the Donbass in the east. Those three locations look close. Are those three locations in succession of each other? No, and Ukraine has control over regions in all three of those. Just word salad, just to throw you off.
Zaporozhye and Kherson areas, over 7.5 million people lived before the start of the military operation. Many of them were forced to become refugees. Those who are left are constantly bombarded by artillery and rocket attacks on the part of the neo-Nazis, who attack hospitals and schools and create acts of terror against the peaceful citizens. We have no moral right to give people that are dear to us to be butchered, and we need to give them a chance to determine their own fate. The parliaments of the DNR and the LNR and the administrations of Kherson and Zaporozhye regions have decided to call referendums on joining Russia, and they
have just suddenly decided to call referendums. This is now he's talking about the annexation referenda within some of these cities within southern Ukraine, which is wild because there's ongoing fighting in the streets of Kherson specifically between Russia's own forces. Russia's having infighting within these cities. This is all speak to people that have no idea what's going actually on in Ukraine. This is all speech for people that have been tuned out, have been living comfortable lives for the past 6 months, have no clue what's going on in Ukraine. They don't know that in these cities, the Russian occupation forces don't even have a solid hold on the cities. Yes, they have them occupied. They're occupying the cities, but it's not going well at all within the cities.
Russia to support such a step. I shall stress we will do all we can to ensure safe conditions for holding the referendums, for people to be able to express their will and decision in their future that will be made by the citizens of the DNR, the LNR, and Zaporozhye and Kherson regions will be supported by us. Dear friends, today our army, as I said, is acting at the military front line, exceeding 1,000 kilometers, and they are facing not just the neo-Nazis, but the whole military machine of the collective West. In this situation, I deem it's necessary to make the following decision.
Victim blaming, or making themselves into a victim. If Russia wouldn't have invaded Ukraine, Western forces wouldn't have been sending weapons to assist with Ukraine. We wouldn't have the United Kingdom wouldn't have had to have been training Ukrainians. The United States has been training Ukrainians in Poland. Countries on the border of Russia, like Finland and Sweden, wouldn't be now joining NATO for over 50 years. Sweden and Finland, since NATO has been created, have been like, nah, we're good. We can protect ourselves, and they can. Sweden and Finland are absolutely capable of protecting themselves. Like, they don't need NATO at all. But just to be on the safe side, I mean, who wouldn't want to be a part of of NATO right now with Russia's aggressions that are taking place in the east of Europe,
which is appropriate in full to the threat we're facing. For defense of our motherland, its sovereignty.
Adding Sweden and Finland to NATO was like adding ringers to like a sports team. Like, did you really need them? I mean, yeah, I mean, no, but they're definitely not. They're going to help. They're great militaries. Absolutely, like, they are completely capable of fighting on their own. The fact that they're joining NATO is just still huge to me.
And territorial integrity. to ensure the security of our people, and in the freed territories, I deem it necessary to support the proposal of the Ministry of Defense and the General Command for partial mobilization held in the Russian Federation. I stress it is partial mobilization. Only those who are currently in reserve will be conscripted, and also those who served in the army have certain military professions and will be always given additional military training, taking into account the special military operation. The decree of partial mobilization has been signed. Officially, the chambers of the Federal Assembly and the State Duma will be informed. The mobilization events shall start today on the 21st of September. I tasked the heads of regions to provide all the necessary assistance to the military commissariats. I shall stress that Russian citizens called up as a part of mobilization will be given all the guarantees, all the benefits of those serving under contract. The decree of partial mobilization encompasses additional measures to defend the state procurement for defense concerning the military technology and additional capacities for its production, or the financial matters for supplying the defense factories shall be resolved by the government without delay.
So essentially, that being able to arm all of these conscripts, all of the production that Russia has been doing for armaments and technologies and military capabilities, that's going to be amped up, like a.
It's aggressive anti-Russian.
Ukraine's already destroyed all of their best capabilities already. Like Russia is now having to start from scratch, kind of with their technologies. The Iranian drones aren't helping them either. They're getting shut down too.
And policy, the West has crossed all lines. We constantly hear threats against our people, and some irresponsible politicians in the West are speaking not just of the plans of providing Ukraine with long-range military systems that would be able to hit the regions of Russia. That is already happening.
Of course, the trolls are back. Putin just took a defibrillator to everybody that's pro what he's doing. He took a defibrillator, was like, oh, clear. And they're just alive for a second until then they get sent to Ukraine and then die. Because again, it's going to take a couple months for any of these conscripts to be combat trained. And then if they even make it that long, and the ones that do get, and then it's going to be the dead of winter by the time of then. In Ukraine, it's
about the border areas, including the Belgorod region, and the systems using strategic drones, planes.
Their drones are terrible.
Doing reconnaissance across the whole of the Russian south. And there are plans in Washington and Brussels to move the military action onto the Russian territory. They're not just talking about Russia being completely destroyed at the battlefield, talking about political, cultural, and all the types of sovereignty with complete pillage. Now they're talking about nuclear blackmail. The Zaporozhye nuclear power plant was shelled
by Russian forces. The Russians have, the military has control over the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Enodahar. The images of the vehicles it's just vivid 4K. Ukraine has Russia in 4K in like the entire country with their drones, with their images. The satellite companies are in on it with each other, so they're watching what's on the ground, like 8K quality camera images of Z vehicles all throughout all throughout the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Just how could you even say that Ukraine is holding the power plant as a they're projecting what they're doing, right? This is how the Russian or the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin operate. They project exactly what they're doing onto their enemy and say that that's what they are doing. What Putin is explaining right now is exactly what the Russian military is doing, but they will never admit to it. They'll lie about it and say that that is what Ukraine is doing. Russia just launched a missile, or launched an artillery strike that landed 300 meters away from the reactor. 300 meters away from the reactor.
Also, some high-positioned representatives of leading NATO states were saying that there might be possibility and permissibility to use nuclear weapons against Russia. Those that allow such statements shall be reminded that our country also has various weapons of destruction. And with regard to certain components, they're even more modern than the NATO ones. And if there is a threat to the territorial integrity
What was that again? More advanced than the NATO. What was that, Cope, there? One more time.
permissibility to use nuclear weapons against Russia. Those that allow such statements shall be reminded that our country also has various weapons of destruction. And with regard to certain components, they're even more modern than the NATO ones. And if there is a threat to the territorial integrity of our country and for protecting our people, we will certainly use all the means available to us. And I'm not bluffing. Russian citizens can be certain that the territorial integrity of our motherland, our freedom and independence shall be secured. I shall stress by all means available to us. And those trying to blackmail us with nuclear weapons should know that the tables can turn on them. In our historic tradition, our people had it in their destiny to stop those who are trying to subjugate our motherland and divide it. And we will do that now. It will happen. I believe in your support.
It will happen. I believe in your support. So that is Putin's entire speech, unedited, and just filled with cope, including the ending, which is just absolutely ridiculous, about Ukrainian forces provocating the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant when Russian forces literally have control over it. And this is in the Zaporizhzhia NPP in Enodahar right here. Let's pull that up real quick. See if I can pull this up real fast. So escalations within the war, Vladimir Putin mobilizing 300,000 reservists to go fight and die in Ukraine. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. Here's the video that he was referring to of the artillery strike that hit 300 meters away from the reactor in the south of Ukraine. Escalations continue. The escalations within the country just continue on. Here's some reactions to partial mobilization ordered by the president. Credit to Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, asking some people about how they feel with the mobilization in Russia. Here we go.
В общем, давайте так. Сами готовы воевать? Нет. Мне работать надо, семью содержать, а не воевать.
Категорически нет.
Почему?
Мир, потому что должен быть мир. И военное время сейчас вообще ни к чему.
Сами готовы воевать?
Нет. Не готов.
То есть это вредная, ненужная...
Это вредная, ненужная инициатива, конечно. В конце концов, мы живем в 21 веке. И я считаю, что все проблемы можно решать не военным путем. Как-то так.
Нет, не поддерживаю. Абсолютно не поддерживаю.
Какие-то есть аргументы у вас?
Ну, непонятная война почему-то. За что воюем? Зачем напали? Категорично против.
Сами готовы идти?
Нет,
воевать?
нет. Не готов. Лучше сяду, но воевать не пойду. За эту власть точно нет.
Вообще я патриот и очень люблю свою родину. Да, родина позовет, пойду.
Да, то есть если мне придет все-таки повестка, то я поеду.
Поедете? А зачем?
Защищать и отстаивать честь нашей страны. Так.
Пошли бы, если бы вы хотели?
Я думаю, что да.
Почему?
Почему?
He's about the age of the volunteers that have been going and fighting in Ukraine. He looks like he'd fit in right with the Tiger Battalion.
Президент об этом все сказал, а я его поддерживаю.
А сына отправите в свою семью, ну, если есть сын?
У сына есть желание, даже есть у сына. У меня есть сын, у него есть желание, 36 лет ему. Но дело в том, что он не служил, вот, поэтому у него военной подготовки нет.
Я против, конечно.
Чтобы призывали?
Конечно.
Почему?
Ну, потому что у нас 3 детей. Я думаю, что вот эти все политические игры, так сказать, да, не хотелось, чтобы они отразились в нашей семье.
That was from a few places within Russia asking civilians how they feel about the partial mobilization ordered by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Here's a response from Zelenskyy, and we're going to listen to some of it. And we've listened to other world leaders, including Vladimir Putin. So here is President Zelenskyy's response to the UN Assembly, to everything that has been happening within Ukraine in the last 6 months.
Was committed against our state borders. The crime was committed against the lives of our people. The crime was committed against the dignity of our women and men. The crime was committed against the values that make you and me a community of the United Nations. And Ukraine demands punishment for trying to steal our territory, punishment for the murders of thousands of people, punishment for tortures and humiliations of women and men, punishment for the catastrophic turbulence that Russia provoked with its illegal war, and not only for us, Ukrainians, but for the whole world, for every nation that is represented in this hall of the UN General Assembly. I'm speaking on behalf of the state which is forced to defend itself but has the formula for peace. I'm speaking to everyone who wants to hear how to achieve peace. I will present a formula that can work, not only for us, but for everyone who may find themselves in similar circumstances as we did. It's a formula that punishes crime, protects life, restores security and territorial integrity, guarantees security, and provides determination. There are 5 preconditions for peace.
This is important here, this part. Vladimir Zelenskyy announces what the 5 preconditions for peace are, and Crimean Peninsula is among them.
President of the General Assembly, dear Secretary General of the United Nations, dear heads of states and governments, dear journalists, nations of the world, Ukraine wants peace. Europe wants peace. The world wants peace. And we have seen who is the only one who wants war. There is only one entity among all UN member states who would say now, if he could interrupt my speech, that he's happy with this war, with his war. But we will not let this entity prevail over us, even though it's the largest state in the world. Ukraine showed strength on the battlefield, using its right to self-defense in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter and no one will reproach us now or in the future with weakness or inability to fight for ourselves, for our independence. We are achieving a result in this fight, and we see what the end of this war will be and what will be the guarantees of a stable peace. The UN Charter proclaims the equality of nations, and we proved that Ukraine is equal among the equals. The UN Charter...
Do y'all believe that Russia should be removed from the United Nations at this point? Let me know in the chat. I'll do a poll on YouTube.
...protects the inviolability of borders, and we confirm our state borderline by expelling the occupiers outside. The UN Charter stipulates the value of human rights, dignity, and life, and we also stipulate them with every Ukrainian city freed from Russian occupation. We didn't provoke this war. We held 88 rounds of talks in various formats to prevent this war, just from the beginning of my presidency until February 24 this year. But Russia, instead of stopping the crime of aggression, which it started back in 2014, turned it into a full-scale invasion. And we have no choice but to defend ourselves. We do it. We push the aggressor beyond the internationally recognized border of the Ukrainian state. And this is the first item of our peace formula. Comprehensive item. Punishment. Punishment for the crime of aggression. Punishment for violation of borders and territorial integrity. Punishment
and their war crimes
that must be in place until the internationally recognized border is restored, until the aggression stops, and until the damages and losses for the war are fully compensated. Therefore, sanctions against the aggressor are part of the peace formula. Blocking the trade and relations with the aggressor is a part of the peace formula. All this is a punishment. So long as the aggressor is a party to decision-making in the international organization, he must be isolated from them, at least until aggression lasts. Reject the right to vote, deprive delegation rights, remove the right of veto if it is a member of the UN Security Council, in order to punish the aggressor within the institutions. We shouldn't turn a blind eye to propagandists who justify aggression, but apply a full package of personal restrictions against them. That is a punishment for lying. Citizens of the aggressor...
Oh, Revenge with some membership gifts. Thank you so much. Some of y'all in the chat were just gifted a monthly membership. Thank you.
...state shouldn't be allowed to enjoy tourism or shopping in the territory of those who value peace, but should be encouraged through visa restrictions to fight against the aggression of their own state. Punish for abetting the evil. A special tribunal should be created to punish Russia for the crime of aggressor against our state. This will become signal to all would-be aggressors.
It's sad he has to ask for a special tribunal when The Hague exists. I will never forget when Ukraine went to petition at the beginning of the invasion, and The Hague asked for a coffee break while they were petitioning the Hague court. So it's sad that he has to ask for a special tribunal in front of the United Nations when there's already an organization that exists that is supposed to stop these events from happening.
They must value peace or be brought to responsibility by the world. We have prepared precise steps to establish such tribunal. They will be presented to all states. Ukraine will appeal to the UN General Assembly to support an international compensation mechanism. We count on your support. Russia should pay for this war with its assets. It's also a punishment. This is one of the most terrible punishments for Russian officials who value money above everything else. The second item of the peace formula is the protection of life, the most concrete item. Now, while the sessions of the General Assembly continue in the Ukrainian town of Izum, Kharkiv region, the exhumation is underway of bodies from a mass burial which happened when the territory was controlled by Russian troops. The bodies of women and men, children and adults, civilians and soldiers were found there, 445 graves. There is a family that died under the rubble of a house after a Russian airstrike. Father, mother, 6- and 8-year-old girls, grandparents. There is a man who was strangled with a rope. There is a woman with broken ribs and wounds on her body. There is a man who was castrated before the murder, and this is not the first case. Ask, please, the representatives of Russia why the Russian military are so obsessed with castration. What was done to them so that they want to do this to others?
He's referring to the absolutely, I mean, I'm sure some of y'all might have saw it or heard about it. It's the box cutter and the Russian soldier that castrated a Ukrainian prisoner of war. It was posted in the Redditors of the thread that it was posted into actually found the location of the soldier that did that and hunted him down.
The only thing that differs the mass burial in Izum from what the world saw in Bucha is in fact the burial. The Russian army was in Izum for a longer time, and therefore the bodies of the killed people were buried and not scattered on the streets. So how can we allow the Russian army somewhere on Ukrainian soil, knowing that they're committing such mass murders everywhere? We cannot. We must protect life. The world must protect life. Every state suffering the armed aggression needs the opportunity to protect its citizens and liberate its territory. If it requires help with weapons or shells, they should be provided. If you needed financial help for this, it should be given. If for this it's necessary to help with intelligence data, just do it. But what is not needed is lies. We can return the Ukrainian flag to our entire territory. We can do it with the force of arms, but we need time. We tried to speed it up. We tried to implement the basic provisions of the UN Charter for Ukraine through negotiations, but Russia is afraid of real negotiations and doesn't want to fulfill any fair international obligations. It lies to everyone, as it's typical for aggressors, for terrorists. Even now, when Russia talks about negotiations, it only wants to slow down its retreat. Russia wants...
Yeah, he's on point with it. Every time Russia picks up rhetoric, it's because they're losing or they're taking massive losses. It's just the only reason that they're trying to muddy the waters with, well, Ukraine isn't asking for peace in Ukraine and they're so warmongering and NATO is just doing this and this because they're losing. If they wouldn't have ever invaded Ukraine in the first place and set themselves up for this massive L they're taking, then this wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't be having to retreat.
To spend the winter on the occupied territory of Ukraine and prepare forces to attempt a new offensive, new Buchas, new Izums, or at least it wants to prepare fortifications on occupied land and carry out military mobilization at home. We cannot agree to a delayed war because it will be even hotter than the war now. For us, this is a war for life. That is why we need defense support, weapons, military equipment and shells. Offensive weapons and long-range one is enough to liberate our land, and defensive systems, above all air defense. And we need financial support to keep internal stability and fulfill social obligation to our people. Physical and social protection are two elements of any nation's life. So the second item of our peace formula is the protection of life by all available means allowed by the UN Charter. The third item of our peace formula is restoring security and territorial integrity. Look at how many elements of global security Russia has undermined with its war. Maritime safety, food safety, radiation safety.
So the third pillar, safety and security.
Energy safety and safety from weapons of mass destruction. We are already restoring maritime safety and food security. And I thank Mr. Antonio Guterres for his personal involvement. Algeria, Ethiopia, Egypt, Libya, Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, Tunisia, Bangladesh, Israel, India, Iran, Yemen, Cyprus, China, Korea, Lebanon, Turkey, Belgium, Bulgaria, Greece, Ireland, Spain, Italy, Netherlands, Germany, Romania, and France have already received Ukrainian agricultural products. And we have to increase the supply by sea, both under market conditions and within the UN food program.
And Russia's hold over the Black Sea in Ukraine and the Southern Axis have made exports to other countries and the food shortage even worse. This is going to be talking about how Russia's leveraging the energy crisis because they have control over it because of the sanctions, and Russia's inability to let the exports leave the port, which they actually now had an export leave a month ago or so. But until then, Russia has prevented all exports from leaving ports within south of Ukraine.
For which Ukraine is always a reliable partner. And by the way, despite all the difficulties caused by the war, we decided to provide humanitarian aid to Ethiopia and Somalia. So we will send them an additional amount of our wheat, but it's more difficult with other security elements. On the eve of the General Assembly meeting, Russia fired missiles at the South Ukraine nuclear power plant. The explosion hit the station buildings. Windows were broken, walls were damaged. The rockets exploded only 300 meters from the walls of the reactors. And this is after the IAEA's clear appeal to Russia to stop any hostile activity against any nuclear facilities of Ukraine.
And they that's when they hit 300 meters away from the reactor, just after the IAEA said to stop.
And in particular, again, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station, the largest one in Europe, which Russia has turned into a target. And that makes all of you a target. Russian radiation blackmailing is something that should concern each and every one of you, because none of you will find a vaccine against radiation sickness. The cost of living crisis continues in dozens of countries. It rules in the destabilization of the energy market. It's necessary to remove the main factor of global price turbulence, namely Russian energy blackmailing. It's necessary to cap the prices at which Russia exports its energy resources. It's necessary to make Russian oil and gas just ordinary goods again. Currently, oil and gas are Russia's energy weapons. And that is why it manipulates the markets so that electricity, gas, petrol, and diesel become the privilege of few instead of being a common goods available to all.
That's huge right there. They're leveraging fuel prices, making them skyrocket. It's being affected in multiple places around the world as a way to punish those that need the fuel and oil, that need the oil and resources from Russia, so that way less countries will support Ukraine, right? So that way less countries are more inclined to, because the rising energy costs are going to put a damper on regular everyday people within the countries in Europe.
Limiting prices is safeguarding the world. This is the way to restore energy and price security. But will the world go for it? Or will it be scared? Will it be scared of Russian threats? It's necessary to take only one strong step, after which everything will become clear. The time has come for this. This step will put everything in place. After the Russian missile terror, after the massacres, after Mariupol, after the burning of the Ukrainian prisoners in
Coach, that's absolutely not true at all. He says that Ukraine killed over 14,000 pro-Russia Ukrainian citizens in this civil war before Russia, and then he put invaded in quotes, so not true at all. Just a whole super chat full of lies.
By the Russian military, after blocking the ports, after the strikes of the Russian tanks and missiles on nuclear power plants, and after threats to use nuclear weapons, which have become the rule, not the exception for Russian propagandists. We must finally recognize Russia as the state of sponsor of terrorism at all levels, in all countries that confess the values of peace and protection of human life, legally, politically. If you don't have a legal mechanism, you can make a political decision in the parliaments. This is the foundation for restoring global security. If this strong step is taken, doubts will disappear whether to take other important steps. And what is very sensitive is the border, the territorial integrity. When one country tries to steal the territory of another state, it puts all of the world nation under attack. Global security cannot be restored without restoring the territorial integrity of the nation which suffered the armed aggression. So the third item of the Ukrainian peace formula is the restoration of security and territorial integrity. The fourth item is security guarantees. Every nation has the right to security guarantees, not only the largest nations, not only the most fortunate ones. We have proposals to upgrade the security architecture for
Fourth one, security guarantees.
Ukraine and for Europe and the world, which will not allow any more aggression against us. We are already presenting them to partners. Proposals for legally binding multilateral and bilateral treaties. These are the conditions for the guarantors to act and the timeline for their actions to bring results. Results on land, at sea, and in the air, in diplomacy and politics, in economy and finance, in providing weapons and intelligence. Each of you who will receive the text of our peace formula will also see the details of what we offer as security guarantees. I do not want to compare our offers with the guarantees of any alliances that exist on the planet now. I want to stress that it is always much better to guarantee the security of a nation preventively.
Can you hear the difference between Zelenskyy and Putin? Just, you can understand his points, he's structured, his speech is coherent, you can understand even in a second language, speaking two languages, speaking English, which isn't his primary language, understand everything he's saying. Vladimir Putin, all word salad. All word salad, garbage, rhetoric, nonsense, way to throw you off and get you in dizzy by the time you're done.
rather than to stop a war after it has already begun. And the fifth item of the Ukrainian peace formula is the determination, something without which the other four items will not work. This is our determination to fight. This is the determination of the partners to help us and also themselves. And this is the determination of the world to unite around the one who fights against armed aggression and to call to order the one who threatens all. So, all five items of our formula: punishment for aggression, protection of life.
So punishment for aggression, number 1. Protection of life, number 2.
Restoration of security and territorial integrity.
Restoration of security and territorial integrity, number 3.
Security guarantees and determination to defend oneself.
Security guarantees and determination to defend oneself.
The formula of crime and punishment, which is already well known to Russia. And this is the formula of justice and law, an order that Russia has yet to learn, as well as any potential aggressors. What is not in our formula? Neutrality. Those who speak of neutrality when human values and peace are under attack mean something else. They talk about indifference, everyone for themselves. Here is what they say. They pretend to be interested in each other's problems. They take care of each other formally. They sympathize only for protocol. And that is why they pretend to protect someone, but in reality, they protect only their vested interests. This is what creates the conditions for war. This is what needs to be corrected in order to create conditions for peace. All you need is determination.
That's the speech from Zelenskyy. We're going to pause it there. We heard Zelenskyy. We listened to Vladimir Putin's speech in full. Zelenskyy laying out the five pillars of which they're seeking for peace, and that again is going to be the punishment for aggression, protection for security and territorial integrity, security guarantees, and determination to defend oneself within Ukraine. Next, we're going to be getting into the entire map breakdown. I'm going to lay out exactly what is going on the ground within Ukraine at this time. If you guys could leave a like on the video, make sure you spam the reactions on Facebook. I've been live on Facebook and YouTube this whole time. We got plenty of video to go through still, some combat footage and some video showing how some of these cities in the east have been liberated. But I'm going to go into a map breakdown. So, map breakdown for day 212 of the war in Ukraine. There are two main fronts within Ukraine at this time. You have the southern axis of Ukraine, including the Crimean Peninsula, and then you have the eastern front, also known as the Donbass. The Donbass is part of it, and we're going to go into Ukraine's counteroffensives that are taking place still in the east, as well as Russia's actions that are still ongoing around Bakhmut and Avdiivka. And then I'm going to go into the southern axis and tell you guys about Ukraine's counteroffensives that are taking place, and then also the actions in which the Russian military is still taking at this time. So starting with the east, from Balikla and Izium down to Donetsk, you have the Ukrainian-controlled city of Izium, Ukrainian-controlled city of Balikla. Here's the Ukrainian counteroffensive directions in the east. So this is where the Ukrainian military is moving, sweeping across eastern Ukraine. They only have about 30 to 35 kilometers left of the Kharkiv Oblast left to liberate before they get to the Lugansk Oblast. You also have the Ukrainian-controlled city of Sloviansk here, and the Ukrainian counteroffensives that are advancing northeast into further or deeper into the Donbass, because this is, further into the Donetsk Oblast, as Lyman is in this northern pocket of Donetsk. And then you also have the Ukrainian military advancing northeast from the town of Seversk up into Bilo-Horivka, and this is in Luhansk Oblast. So you got the Ukrainian military advancing in all three oblasts, in Kharkiv, in Donetsk, and in Luhansk here along this eastern front. Updates from the east for Ukraine's counteroffensives. Ukrainian forces likely continued offensive operations along the Lyman-Yampil-Bilohorivka line on the 20th. An unnamed senior U.S. defense official stated that Ukrainian and Russian forces are engaged in artillery duels near Liman. Several Russian sources claim that Ukrainian troops are attacking Liman from the northwest around Svitoritsk and Yarova area. So what does that look like? This is the Svitoritsk-Yarova area right here. Okay, you got the Ukrainian-controlled city of Sloviansk. Ukrainian counteroffensives advancing northeast in Ozerny along the T0514 highway, and then up here near Dobrovshcheny, and then here is the Ukrainian-controlled city of Svitoritsk as counteroffensives are advancing eastward from the location. You can see that the defensive line here is connected, and the Ukrainians are gaining ground in which they're going to be liberating the city of Liman within the week, and that is the currently Russian-controlled city of Liman here. Okay, Ukrainian counteroffensives advancing onto it. Same within this frame, you have the Ukrainian-controlled city of Seversk, and these are the counteroffensives that are advancing eastward in Bilohorivka and Serbianka. Ukrainian-controlled city of Izium is right here. Russian forces are likely targeting Ukrainian hydrotechnical infrastructure in Kharkiv and Lugansk oblasts to threaten Ukrainian positions along the Seversky Donetsk River. So that is along this front line here. The Seversky Donetsk River goes from southwest of Lysychansk over to Liman, connects up to the Oskol River. So that's in this territory here on the big map. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian forces unsuccessfully attempted to destroy a dam over the Penshchensky Reservoir, which is 35 kilometers east of Kharkiv city. The Ukrainian General Staff statement is likely corroborated by social media footage that shows an explosion of a large smoke plume after impact following a reported Russian strike on a dam across the Seversky Donetsk River. The Penshchensky Reservoir is just upstream of the Seversky Donetsk, which is along which Ukrainian troops have established pontoon bridges and other alternative river crossings on the Tenanivka-Prishib-Liman-Yampil line. Russian forces likely sought to target this dam to flood the Seversky Donetsk River and isolate Ukrainian troops who have crossed the river south of Liman from established positions on the right bank, as well as to prevent additional Ukrainian troops from crossing the attack on Russian positions of the left bank. So basically just Russian forces shelling the Ukrainian advancement from the Ukrainian counteroffensives that are advancing further into the Donetsk Oblast, and the Ukrainian forces that are advancing eastward into the remainder of the Kharkiv Oblast. Basically just the Russians trying to bog down and slow down those attempted advancements. Okay, that's about it for the news. There hasn't been much on the ground news in the East beyond, again, which we went into on our live stream. Follow our page, subscribe to the channel to watch the full live stream of the map breakdown and the coverage. But we just went into the full video showing Vladimir Putin mobilizing 300,000 troops to come and fight in Ukraine, and that is the biggest news of the day. But on the ground here, not much has changed beyond Ukraine connecting this front line of their counteroffensives as they're advancing towards the city of Liman. Okay, that's Ukrainians' counteroffensives that are taking place here in the east. Not a whole lot to update on the ground. In response to that, you have the Russian advancements here that are taking place. As you notice, the trolls and other people leave during this time because this is the informational portion of the stream, and it's less about ideological rhetoric. It's more about the facts and what's going on the ground in Ukraine, which I've noticed there's less interest in that, which is wild to me because this is the truth. This is the facts of the matter, and I don't know where everyone goes during this part, but you can see that more people are attracted to ideology and rhetoric than they are the truth of what's going on. Likely why it's such a shock to see the Ukrainians having such success within Ukraine, and why the ideology is not carrying the Russians any further here. So you have Bakhmut, the Ukrainian-controlled city of Bakhmut, right here, and then you have the Ukrainian-controlled city of Advidka and the Russians' advancement onto the city. So here's the Russian efforts that are still taking place within Ukraine. Russian forces conducted ground attacks throughout Donetsk Oblast on the 20th. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Ukrainian troops repelled attempted Russian advancements south of Bakhmut and around Kudrynivka, Mykolivka Druha, and Zadetsiv, which is just 8 kilometers southeast of Bakhmut, and Mayorsk, which is just 20 kilometers southwest of Bakhmut. A Russian blogger claimed that the 3rd Brigade of the 1st Army Corps troops of Donetsk People's Republic took control of Zadetsiv, although the study of war cannot independently verify the claim. So the city of Zadetsiv, which has gone back and forth between Ukrainian and Russian forces all summer, that is right here. So there's still ongoing attempts here in the city of Zadetsiv. Let's zoom in there. So this was the counteroffensives from Ukraine. Now we're going to go down into the Russian advancements on Bakhmut and Adviivka. So let's go like right. I wish I had a perfect zoom, but it's not perfect, but we'll go right here. More of a zoomed in look. Bakhmut. Here's the Russian advancements onto Bakhmut from Popasna and the Wagner private military contractors. Soledar, advancements right onto the city. And then here is the city of Zadetsiv. There's like a three-pronged attempted approach onto Bakhmut, and they've all failed, minus a couple incremental gains to the north of Bakhmut in the city of Soledar, but the Russians are still fighting and the Ukrainians are still fighting over the city of Zadetsiv, which is right here on your map. Russian troops continued ground attacks along the northwestern and southwestern outskirts of Donetsk city. So this is further southward here on Adviivka. So that's it. Just within the east, the Russians and Ukrainians fighting over the city of Zadetsiv. The Russians have claimed control over it. It goes back and forth between Russian hands and Ukrainian hands on nearly a weekly basis. And again, that's south of the city of Bakhmut. And next here is the Ukrainian-controlled city of Adviivka and the Russian-controlled city of Donetsk, and the Russian attempted advancements here in Pisky and Marinka, just south of the city of Adviivka. So Russian troops continued ground attacks along the northwestern and southwestern outskirts of Donetsk city and attempted to advance around Pervomiatsky and Avelsky area and in Marinka. So the Russians are still attempting advancements here. That is not stopped. That is, we're still waiting for the Russians to kind of peel back from this. They might not, now that Vladimir Putin has announced a mobilization of 300,000 reservists to go fight Ukraine. They might try to keep trickling this attempted advancements just to continue something, just to have some semblance of any success within Ukraine. And again, it's very incremental, and it's not every single day. One day they might lose a city within this same pocket, and they'll gain it back a couple days later, and then it's just very, very much atrocious here between Ukraine and Russia's advancements. And this is the only location in the entirety of the map of Ukraine, in this war map, in which Russia is still attempting advancements and is still attempting to try to gain territory within Ukraine. So again, the Russian troops continued ground attacks on outskirts of Donetsk city, specifically in the Pisky area and Marinka. And that is going to be here on your map. Here is Pisky and here is Marinka. And so that just signifies that the Russians have not yet stopped their attempted attacks in trying to advance within Ukraine. All right, these are the three locations. There hasn't been any gained ground. Russian troops have not gained any ground here, just that there's still kinetic activity. There's still fighting going on in these three places, indicating that Russia is still trying to advance. So all in all, in the East, a pretty simplified update for the day, because again, the biggest news is going to be the mobilization of 300,000 reservists from Vladimir Putin and the protests that have sparked in Russia in response to this. But on the ground in Ukraine, we're looking at Ukrainian counteroffensives increasing here in the northeast of this pocket of the Donbass, north of Sloviansk, as the Ukrainians are advancing towards the city of Liman. Look for the Ukrainian troops to liberate the city of Liman in the coming days, if not week. And you have the Ukrainian soldiers still advancing up into Lugansk, into this northeastern pocket, into Luhansk Oblast, and they just recently liberated the city of Bilohorivka. You have the Russian troops fighting with Ukrainians over Zadetsiv, and then you have the Russians that are still advancing here in Pitsky and Marinka, are having at least some kinetic activity fighting over the regions, attempting to advance. And that is it for the Eastern Front. Not much has changed on the ground in the last 24 hours. Next, we're going to get into the southern axis of Ukraine. Okay, all the way from Mykolaiv, or excuse me, all the way from Odessa. So I'm going to highlight the Ukrainian-controlled city of Odessa, all the way over to the Russian-controlled city of Mariupol. So you got Odessa, Mykolaiv, Kryvyi Rih, Nikopol, Zaporizhia, Huliopol, for the main Ukrainian-controlled cities, and then the main Russian-controlled cities along the southern axis is going to be Kherson, Novokhovka, Melitopol, Berdyansk, and Mariupol. All right, and keep in mind, the Russians are not advancing whatsoever. This is a large pocket. This is a large mass of land here, and the Russians are not advancing into Ukraine on any of it. Only this pocket here, and this is a more zoomed out version in reference to the Eastern Front, and this is it. Just this front line here in the green circle is where the Russians are still attempting combat operations, trying to take further territory in Ukraine. This is the only pocket, and keep in mind it's taken them 3 weeks to even take this small city of Pitsky here, and the double that's kind of circled in now, this green circle. It's taken the Russians 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks, a month to take that city, and they're still fighting over it, whereas it's taken Ukraine it took Ukraine 3 days to liberate this massive space in the Kharkiv Oblast. And then things have kind of slowed down, but that is due to the Ukrainians having to resupply their troops in the front lines, having to move their artillery pieces, having to move all of their supplies to this new front line in the east. And now that they have, they're actually, I forgot to mention this earlier, but there actually were attempted Russian advancements onto the city of Kupiansk, and the Ukrainians were able to repel those attacks due to the new equipment that has been moved to the new front line, and they were able to establish defensive positions in Kupiansk. And that's always a risk when you take new territory and new land. When you advance your front line, those new front lines are going to be weakened. Your defenses aren't going to be perfect because you're trying to build them up. You have people that are establishing security, like on the ground, soldiers on the ground establishing security with firearms, making sure shit's okay while you're setting up a fob or a cob, while you're setting up a base of operations. That's all very fluid, a lot of nuance there, and that takes time. So while your soldiers are holding security or are securing the area on the ground, that takes away your resources, and that's just kind of a slow process, like real-time slow process to get the artillery pieces and new equipment to the front. Now Ukraine has done that. Ukraine is getting their artillery pieces to this front line. I forgot to mention that. Maybe we can splice that into the Eastern Front, but I just wanted to let y'all know that these Ukrainian controlled cities, they're not being threatened by Russian advancements, right? And especially these newly liberated cities. The only two locations, or the only location in which Russia is still attempting to advance, is going to be this pocket of the Donbass from Bakhmut to Advitka, and it is very incremental. So the Ukrainian counteroffensives in the south in Kherson Oblast. Ukrainian forces continued efforts to interdict Russian ground lines of communication in Kherson on September 19th, 20th, and 21st as Russian troops continue attempts to reconstitute their ground lines of communication. Ukrainian officials reported multiple air and artillery strikes against Russian manpower and equipment concentrations in the Berislav, Henechitsk, Kakhovsk, and Kherson districts, among other areas, as well as on bridges and pontoon and barge crossings. Ukraine's Southern Operational Command reported that Ukrainian artillery strikes disrupted Russian attempts to establish alternative crossings sites across the Dnipro River around Novokhovka. So the Russians are still attempting to build bridges. Let's zoom in. Let's zoom in on the Dnipro River. Here's Kherson and Novokhovka. Russian-controlled city of Kherson, Russian-controlled city of Novokhovka, and then I'm going to do like a pink to highlight where the river is. Here's the Dnipro. This is the Dnipro River. Draw a couple lines so it's a little thicker. Okay, I'm going to use yellow to show where the bridges are. Here's the Antonivsky Bridge. And here's the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant. It's a dam. That's a dam on the Dnieper River, and the Ukrainians have hammered both of those targets. And as those two main crossings have been destroyed by HIMARS, by M270s and other artillery pieces, Russia's building pontoon bridges to try to continue to resupply their troops in this northern region of the Dnipro River, right? This river separates the Russians in the south because this cuts off the Russians here. If the Russians are cut off here, here's that same line along the Dnipro River, the Ukrainians can take this whole territory without the Russians being able to cross, without the Russians being able to resupply or regroup or bring fresh troops into this territory, right? This is the most realistic territory that the Ukrainians are looking to try to liberate in these southern counteroffensives north of the Dnipro River, because it will cut the Russians off in the south, or excuse me, south of the Dnipro River. Ukrainian sources maintain operational silence regarding Ukrainian ground attacks in Kherson, and Russian sources offered unusually limited coverage of activities in this area on the 20th and the 21st. Pro-Russian sources reported that Ukrainian forces went over to the defensive around Posad-Pokrovsky and in the Olenivsk front, which is 35 kilometers west of Kherson city, after unsuccessful attempts to advance. Russian sources also claim that Ukrainian forces prepared to conduct defensive operations in the Oleni-Mykolaibrivka area, which is just south of Kherson, Dnipropetrovsk Oblast border. Ukraine's Operational Command South reported that Russian forces attempted a platoon-size attack in the direction of Davdiv Brid along Bilohorivka in the Kherson-Mykolaiv Oblast border, but were turned back by Ukrainian artillery. So that's going to be here. That's in this pocket, as the Ukrainians are still attempting advancements into Russian territory here with counteroffensives. The Russians are trying to limit that, and they've failed now twice. That's two reports almost back to back, day to day, that the Ukrainians are still fighting in that region of Davdiv Brid, and the Russians are trying to slow it down and repel it, and have failed and have actually retreated back further into their territory. And that's just been an ongoing kinetic event within the south. Pro-Russian sources continue to obsess about a possible Ukrainian operation against the Kinburn Spit in the Kherson Oblast, although no evidence has been presented that any such operation was undertaken or planned. Russian forces continue to attack Okachev, however, possibly in response to the supposed Ukrainian operation in Kinburg Spit, when a pro-Russian outlet claimed that Russian forces have recently destroyed the Ukrainian headquarters responsible for the Kinburg Spit operations. So Russians responding in the south with artillery strikes across Mykolaiv. Ukrainian forces are advancing further southward into the Russian territory in Kherson. The Russians attempted to slow that down with ground forces and were repelled. Okay, and that is in the two circles. So, or that's in the green circle. So Russians still trying to build pontoon bridges and crossings to get across the Dnieper River. Ukrainians continue to hammer and hit those bridges with artillery strikes. Not many reports of any Russian successes at all here in the south. The Russians are on complete defense mode. They're on their heels. And there's still not a whole lot of information coming out from Ukraine's side, as they're still observing operational security. They're observing an operational silence, trying not to let Russia know, because everybody is tuned into this at this point, not trying to give out too much information so that way they can take Russia by surprise like they did in the East. They have to win the information battle. Russia's going to continue pounding people with rhetoric and ideology and propaganda and copium, whereas Ukraine has to be very strategic and not reveal their movements, because also very hard to take forces by surprise these days, as even though Russia's capabilities of UAVs and able to observe territory is not as good as Ukraine has. They still have the ability to see behind enemy lines with drones or other capabilities, and it's easy to kind of see like where the enemy is. So it's extra important for Ukraine to keep their information tight and not reveal their movements before they happen. Perfect example is what happened in the East. Nobody saw that coming. Nobody saw what was happening in the East coming, and you saw that was highly effective, and they were able to liberate more territory than maybe they could have if they were to like even indications. There was some small indications of this counteroffensive taking place in the East, and we talked about it, and that was the Ukrainian counteroffensive advancements towards Svitoritsk and Dovenki, as they were trying to do probing attacks to try to see how the Russian defensive lines were in Izium, and then once those kind of dissipated, and then the counteroffensives in the south were widely announced. It was mainstream news. The world knew about it. Like, hey, Ukraine, a new effort in the Ukraine war. It was plastered all over the media, and that's when Ukraine was like, okay, now the world's focused on what's happening here. Now we're going to move our troops across in the East, because even Russia wasn't even paying attention to what was going on in the East. And they had like 20,000 troops here in Izium. Not good at all for the Russian military and Russian military strategery or strategizing. The 300,000 conscripts that are going to be sent into Russia are going to be pure cannon fodder unless by some miracles a chunk of them are able to survive until the winter and get some combat training, because it takes about a month to 2 months to like kind of get it, especially if you're like green coming like as a civilian and you've never even like been in a military. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt too when I say that, because they're straight up being sent into Ukraine with zero training. They're going to receive maybe a week, not even, and then they're in a front line in Ukraine somewhere. Not only that, in some of these occupied cities within Ukraine, the military-aged males are going to be conscripted into the Russian military. So likely, and that's a gross topic on itself, but likely some Ukrainian citizens that are in occupied Russian territories are going to likely be conscripted into the Russian military and have to go fight against their own people. Absolutely disgusting situation. So the supporting effort in the south for the Russian military. So this is how the Russians are responding to the Ukrainian counteroffensives. Russian forces did not conduct any confirmed ground attacks west of Huliopol on the 20th and continued routine artillery strikes throughout Zaporizhia Oblast. Russian sources continued to accuse Ukrainian forces of shelling Zaporizhia nuclear power plant and surrounding infrastructure in Inorodhar. Russian forces continued missile and artillery strikes throughout Mykolaiv and Dnipropetrovsk oblasts and targeted infrastructure in the port city of Okachiv. So the Russians are blaming Ukraine for shelling Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. It's already been reported that the Russians were going to start provocations on the power plant before this even began, that the Russians were going to use it as a nuclear human shield. This is a common tactic by the Russians to shell their own even controlled cities or their own places to establish a false flag, so then they can propagandize it to their own people and say, hey, look, Ukraine is shelling the plant, when it's really Russia shelling it themselves. And none of this would even be happening if Russia had no control over these power plants, despite the IAEA's wishes, because now the IAEA has visited the power plant. They've asked for escalations to decrease. They've asked for the Russians to demilitarize the nuclear power plants, and they're not doing so. They're not doing so whatsoever. And that is it. That's it for the Russian effort within the south. They didn't do anything. Just continuing missile and artillery strikes throughout Mykolaiv and Dnipropetrovsk. So that is artillery strikes in this region. It's going to be all artillery strikes in here. Try to slow down the Ukrainian counteroffensives. So more on this, the mobilization and force generation efforts. So this is how Russia's sending their units into Ukraine and how they're being paid, what they're being comprised of. Russian forces continue to degrade their force generation capabilities by cannibalizing training elements to fight in combat formations within Ukraine. Ukrainian General Staff reported that the Russian military is forming 4 new infantry battalions at the base of the Russian 36th Motorized Rifle Brigade. That the Russian military is pulling faculty from the Russian Far Eastern Higher Combined Arms Command School. That's a long school name. The Russian Far Eastern Higher Combined Arms Command School to serve as officers in these battalions. The Russian military's continued stripping of Russian training units and service academies of personnel will further impede its ability to train new conscripts and replacements. Russia continues to drain its forces deployed on bases outside of Russia since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began in February. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian military political leadership decided to withdraw unspecified elements of the Russian 217th Airborne Assault Regiment from the 98th Airborne Division from the Syrian Arab Republic and prepare them for deployment into Ukraine. The Kremlin continues mobilizing Ukrainian citizens in occupied southern Ukraine. The Russian-appointed occupation head of occupied Zaporizhia Oblast, Evgeny Belitsky, announced plans to form a Zaporizhia volunteer battalion of 240 personnel on September 20th. The formation of irregular, hastily trained units adds little effective combat power to Russian forces fighting within Ukraine. Cannon fodder. Literal cannon fodder, just numbers to throw at Ukrainian artillery, just to try to waste Ukraine's capabilities. That's literally what it's for. They're going to be untrained, unequipped, no pay, and likely against their will. Super fucked up situation. A good amount now of these new conscripts are likely going to be there against their will. Right now, the majority are there on their own volunteer status. They're not receiving their benefits despite volunteering, but we're going to be seeing an influx of fighters being sent against their will into Ukraine to go fight for Russia. And that is it for your map breakdown for day 111 of the war in Ukraine. Please leave a comment below. Anything you'd like to see added or changed, or anything I can adjust to these map breakdowns. You can tune in every day to these map updates, or you can tune in to our live streams at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. Let's do a viewer check-in. Let me know where you're all tuned in from. What city, what state, where in the world y'all are watching from. This is the Orc Hunters on Mercado Media. We've been covering this war since the beginning, since the invasion began. We're going to go into some combat footage. Join our Discord server. We have an amazing Mercado Media Discord. I have a Telegram channel. The links are all in the description of the videos on both Facebook and YouTube. So we touched on the biggest news of the day so far, and that is going to be Vladimir Putin announcing partial mobilization of 300,000 reserve conscripts to go fight within Ukraine. Now I have a couple more stories to go through from the Ukrainian counteroffensives, as more and more stories and documentation are coming out from the civilians in these ex-occupied Russian cities. Some more interviews from the Ukrainian military, and we're going to be getting into that really quick here. So here's an inside story of Ukraine's Kharkiv counteroffensive, and this is from the east.
Пробили коридор, тобто знищили їх еспехи і вибили їх з лопів. А далі вже ми увірвалися на вулиці і рухались по ним і витісняли їх. Ми ж не тільки по трасам рухались, тобто ми в обхід намагались ходити. Вони просто не встигали. Пробивати коридор було важче, тому що саме там вони ще намагались чинити якийсь саме організований опір. А в Ізюмі, на етапі вже зачистки Ізюму, я так розумію, у них вже була повна дезорганізація.
So this is the Ukrainian city of Izium.
Ми рейдом просто зайшли, ми по тилу ворога йшли, скажу вам так. Такого як опору, я не можу сказати, що він був. Втікали, кидали все і втікали, і ще раз втікали. Брали полонених, заблудилися які, палили, набрали полонених, там хлопці взяли взагалі капітана, командира танкової роти. Сплановано дуже і дуже добре.
Саме з 7 ПМ, оце я з такої хлопці збили. Да. Тобто робив розрахунок, робив кілька пусків, і якась із них догнала і збила цього літака.
Ukraine claims to have liberated over 400 settlements during the counteroffensive.
Завдяки якраз і продвигались по 100, по 200 метрів. Посадку за посадкою, і так от сюди і дійшли. Місцевих питали, що вони зночі почали збиратися і втікати звідси. У нас навіть бойового розпорядження не було в Ізюм заходити. Ми повинні були взяти малу Комишуваху. Ми зайшли, вийшли з села, зустріли місцевих, вони кажуть, в наступному селі теж нікого нема. Ми механіку цього БТР, водія, сказали, їдь до Ізюма, в жарт. І їдемо, а тут вже стела Ізюма. Так і сюди і заїхали.
Ukraine says it plans to liberate all of its territory occupied by Russia. Meanwhile, Moscow has ordered a partial military mobilization for Russian citizens. How many of y'all in the chat think that this shit is about to increase? Like, it's escalate. It's almost like we're reliving, like a lot of it. Like the counteroffensives by Ukraine. When Vladimir Putin announced the invasion in the 24th, looks very similar to him announcing mobilization. You have the Russian troops that got their ass kicked around Kyiv, that got moved, and that was an escalation when that happened, when Ukraine was able to do that and move them further east. And then you have Ukraine doing the same exact thing in the east and moving the Russian troops in retreat further eastward away from the Kharkiv Oblast. It's almost like we're reliving some of the stages we've seen in this war, but they're getting escalated each time. We've seen this. We've seen this stuff happen already. When Russia, because you got to realize before the invasion, there was conflict in the east in Donbass for 8 years. It's not like the invasion was suddenly like the war began. That was an escalation. It escalated from what it was in the east to what it has been for 6 months. So I'm concerned that we're in a new phase of the war, and it's going to escalate beyond what we've been watching. World War III is brewing, in my opinion, but I've been saying that. It's all been indicators. We'll go into some more of the protest videos, but here's Ukrainian claims tortured by Russians. So former Ukrainian serviceman claims Russians tortured him. So here's an interview with a Ukrainian citizen.
Alexander Glushko says he spent the last fortnight.
Credit to Reuters for this report.
Alexander Glushko says he spent the last fortnight of the Russian occupation in Izium jailed by Russian soldiers in the dank ruins of a police station, where he was tortured with electric wires.
There I spent 2 weeks. There was no beating anymore.
No, they won't. That's assuming Russia's troops are good. They're not. They're terrible. They're just going to get killed. Like they did at the beginning of the invasion, when Russia was just Leroy Jenkinsing it into Ukraine, and like they had no tactics and they were all over the place and they were in groups and just going all over it. Ukraine was just watching them with their drones, and it was just like easy pickings. And then now for the past 5 months or 4.5 months, Russia's troops have kind of figured it out to bog down and build trenches in all throughout Ukraine, but that still doesn't help because they're still being seen by the drones and they're still being hit. It's just going to be a repeat of what we saw in the beginning of the war when the Russians were going into the Ukraine and were all over the place and just getting destroyed. And that's when we first opened our eyes to how shitty the Russian military is. No, they're not. They're going to be numbers for Ukraine's artillery. Ukraine needs more munitions. That's what this tells me, is that they need more munitions.
We'll talk.
They don't have the skill. They don't have the morale.
There was
your numbers do not, numbers with a soldier don't mean anything. You need morale. They have a heartbeat. It's not a robot. They're a person out there.
Electric current, electricity.
On like the Kremlin and supporters of what's going on believe that soldiers are just like a robot, that you can just program one and they're all the same. Absolutely not.
2 clamps on the fingers and they pressed the button and I jumped high.
Glushko is a former serviceman who fought for Kiev against Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine from 2018 to 2020. He said he had been interrogated
I'm citing what we watched with our own... the trolls are back now. That we're watching video. They didn't want to listen to what I was saying.
Moscow's forces in Izium about the whereabouts of Ukrainian territorial defense personnel.
I started giving them disinformation. There, over there. I did not provide details, but said, somewhere there, I saw something. They went there, checked, came back, and beat me up. In short, I ended up like a vegetable.
Reuters was unable to independently verify certain aspects of Glushko's version of events, including the specifics of his torture. When Russian troops withdrew from the town on September 9th and 10th, he said he wept with joy as he and other detainees were suddenly set free. Glushko said he was also beaten during an earlier 5-day stint in Russian captivity in May. He said his hands and feet were tied behind his back throughout the 5 days in a torture position known as the swallow. He said he was given no food or water. He was eventually released by his jailers and found by passers-by. As a result of the May episode, Glushko can now only walk with difficulty using a cane. The doctor who treated Glushko was unable to speak to Reuters because he was operating on a patient, according to a nurse. The hospital could not be reached for further comment by phone or email, as there is no telephone or internet coverage in Izium. Asked about Glushko's account of torture, 2 neighbors who did not give their names said that he had been arrested twice and was in a very bad physical condition when he was brought back by residents the first time. Sergei Bolvanov, the head of investigative police in Kharkiv region, declined to comment on individual cases, but said they have information about the torture of civilians and illegal detention in Izium. The Russian Defense Ministry did not respond to Reuters' request for comment. Russia has constantly denied its troops have committed war crimes since its troops invaded Ukraine in February.
And they're lying.
On Monday, the Kremlin rejected allegations of such abuses in Kharkiv region, where Izium is located, as a lie.
All right, so Russia will absolutely not admit to any war crimes taking place within Ukraine. They haven't, and they don't even admit to killing civilians. Ukraine war, frontline city under Russian fire even after retreat. This is in the town of Kupiansk. This is a part of the Ukrainian counteroffensives as they're pushing further eastward in the Kharkiv Oblast. Credit to Sky News for this one.
These streets are no longer under Russian control, but they're still in firing range. Imagine having to get used to this. It's the reality of Russia's war, with Ukraine having to fight to win back its land. But not everyone's a fan.
How are you feeling living in the middle of all this chaos, this war?
Як ви себе почуваєте, живучи зараз?
Good point from supporter Mike on Facebook. And the other thing too is people that want to minimize my knowledge is I was in the US military. I'm a veteran. I was a sergeant in the US military, so I had to go to NCO Academy and all that stuff, right? I was deployed in the Middle East. I have experience. I know what the mind of a soldier is like. I know what it's like to be a soldier. A lot of the other commentators that are covering the war don't have that type of a knowledge, so I know it. Also, we have seen the failures of the Russian military. So not only can I analyze how bad they are based upon my own knowledge of being a soldier, we can see it with our own eyes on screen. But Mike on Facebook made a good comment, says, takes time to train people to actually be decent in combat. And don't forget that winter is coming, so that those being trained, it'll be much slower process to learn how to become a soldier in the cold weather, because not only are you learning soldiering, you have to learn cold weather training, which is its own block of training. That's its own that's at least an 80-hour block of training in the US military, and they don't have 80 hours to learn cold weather training. So you got to learn how to survive in the cold, how to be a soldier at the same time. So they have to learn double the amount of information as this winter is approaching. These 300,000 reservists, that's why so many are fleeing Russia, because they know they're going to die. They know they're going to get killed. It's not going to be good.
She sarcastically thanks Ukrainian troops for destroying the city center in Kupiansk, completely ignoring Russia's role.
Как мы живем, посмотрите, как мы живем. Работ нету, денег нету, зарплат нету, ничего нету, жрать нечего. Света нет, газа нет, воды нет. Я голову не мою уже вторую неделю. Как мы живем? Всю жизнь мечтали так жить. Вот всю жизнь, жили, мечтали. Когда ж нам развалят город? Хреново живем, очень хреново. Дай Бог, чтоб никто так не жил.
I don't blame her.
We're in the city centre. You can hear the sounds of war. Yes, the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back, but they've not disappeared. People here, the very few that we've spoken to, are clearly terrified. The city is in ruins at the moment, and there's no sign of how long it's going to take until there's a real sense of liberation. Something coming in. I can hear it.
We visited on 2 consecutive days. They both sounded like this.
Come on.
Russia's markings removed from the local police station as Ukrainians return to work despite the danger. The Russians use this place to detain and potentially torture people.
Як ми бачимо, вони тут ця камера розрахована на 2 особи, але тут на чоловіку 4 особи, 2 особи зверху та 2 особи знизу. В таких умовах.
The interrogation room now a crime scene as they collect DNA evidence.
Good.
A building opposite was also used by the Russians.
So Russian language?
Да.
And this was your officers?
Unclear if this was caused by a Ukrainian or a Russian strike. One thing's for certain, the threat now is from Russia.
So we can hear the sound of incoming fire now. We heard a drone noise up ahead, which we were told is the Russians potentially trying to find positions to be able to strike. Doesn't feel very safe right now.
On the edge of the city, a semblance of normality, but don't be fooled.
У меня дети живут на другом конце города, я их не вижу, я боюсь туда до них дойти. Там и внуки, там и дети. Господи, за что нам такое наказание?
It's a question all of this country keeps asking. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Kupiansk.
And Kupiansk is, the Ukrainians have been able to cross the river in the city of Kupiansk. So real quick, show y'all again. The Ukrainians have been able to cross and I've established positions on the eastern bank of the river, but that city is very much on the front line of the Ukrainian counteroffensive advancements, as again the Ukrainian military is trying to finish liberating the remainder of the Kharkiv Oblast, and just an outline of that is going to be right here. It's this solid double line you see. I'm sure you see a couple of them on the map, and this is just the Oblast boundaries. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect outline there, but that's loosely there how much territory the Ukrainians have left to go to completely liberate the Kharkiv Oblast. They have Kharkiv city liberated. The city of Kharkiv is under Ukrainian control, but the Oblast, or the county, if you will, or the parish, that they still have some territory left to go, and they are still advancing across the river in multiple locations on this counteroffensive, right? So it's not like they're slowing down, just getting new equipment to the front lines, getting new artillery. It's still advancing. It's still a very kinetic situation with the Ukrainian counteroffensives ongoing in the east. So great report from Sky News there. So in response to Putin's mobilization, we watched a couple earlier, but we're going to go into some of the videos again in case you just started tuning in now. But here's some of the anti-mobilization protesters, again, credit to Sky News for this report, that have been gathering in Moscow that are protesting this mobilization by Vladimir Putin.
As you can see here, pretty dramatic scenes, and bear in mind we haven't seen protests in cities for the last 5 or 6 months. People have been so scared of the fact that they will be detained, and that is clearly...
What do y'all think in the chat? Do you think it's too little too late? Do you think the Russian people should have been protesting the whole time? Catch-22, because if they were protesting, they would have been thrown in the jail and likely could have added... It's just such a mind-bending situation, because on one hand you're like, damn, I wish they would have did more, right? I wish the people of Russia would have did more to speak out against what Russia was doing, but at the same time that could have added more. If more people were protesting, that could have added more numbers to the Russian military, because they're conscripting these protesters into the Russian military after they're arrested. Just a mess of a situation. Let me know what you think, though.
It's happening, but this mobilization announcement has brought people out onto the streets here in Moscow, in Yekaterinburg, in various other cities across the country, and police are dealing with them very brutally. And it is extraordinary, actually, to see how brave people are being, to hear them chanting "No to war, Nie Vojna," and to brave the police reaction. You can see that reaction. I'm not saying that everybody in this country is against this partial mobilization. I've been out on the streets talking to people today, and some people, especially the older generation, are saying this is what we have to do. We have to save the people of Donbass, and they soak up Vladimir Putin's rhetoric. But there are people, as you can see here now, who don't agree.
Sure looks like their police force is thirsty for some action. A militarized police force in Russia, for sure.
Who are worried about this escalation, who don't want to have to go and fight. And of course, this is something that the Kremlin has avoided. They have said this entire duration, the last 7 months.
Which is exactly how Yanukovych's police acted in Ukraine, which contributed to everything and killed 26 protesters when they were protesting Yanukovych's decision to pull out of the EU deal and go with Vladimir Putin's deal. But they don't want to hear that. The trolls don't want to hear that.
Not considering a partial or a full mobilization, and then lo and behold, just 2 weeks, essentially, after that Ukrainian counteroffensive, President Putin makes the announcement. He says he's going to partially mobilize for now. The defense minister says it's just 300,000 men. Well, that's a considerable number of men. It won't necessarily be the panacea that he might hope it
Yes, during the Maidan protests.
can be. It will take time to train those men up. It will take time to rotate them in. Winter is coming. But it is a considerable number to send in. And of course, once you've gone for partial mobilization, you can also always raise those numbers. It will only be the Ministry of Defense who's counting. So this is an escalation. Let's just turn around again and see what's going over there. And of course, then you had those nuclear threats from Vladimir Putin.
How long do you think the war? It's going to continue for? It's going to go through the winter into next year. I'm thinking it's going to be it's going to be a topic of interest in the U.S. as we have our midterm elections coming up, and the Russian propaganda is reaching Americans and reaching their minds, and they're being like, they don't want to send money to help Ukraine now, those that are being influenced by the Russian propaganda, so they're going to vote for politicians that are likely going to be less inclined to support Ukraine, especially when we have a new presidential election in the United States. Vladimir Putin needs as many Western leaders that or Western political candidates that are not pro-Ukraine to take power, and that's going to take some time. If it's going to take some time. So.
We've heard them before. We had just at the start of this him putting the nuclear forces on alert, but to say to blame the West for nuclear blackmail, which is what he did, to say that NATO members were raising the spectre, the prospect of a nuclear war, which they are not. And then to threaten and say...
We have so much money in the United States. All that money could be going... We could be supporting taxes, local and state. Trust me. I covered United States shit for 2 years straight, and we were at the worst of our disagreements. It's only going to get worse during the next election season. But whenever the whole we need to take care of shit at home is just complete garbage, because every time that people stand up and are like addressing issues in the United States, they're called Antifa fucking liberals. So I don't want to hear that garbage, dude.
Russia's arsenal in its entirety would be used to defend the motherland, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the motherland, and then to say, I am not bluffing. I think from a fairly paranoid leader of a powerful nuclear state, those are warnings that we do have to take seriously.
And Diana, you make the point that this is just a partial mobilization that's been announced, and are the scenes around you, is this why Vladimir Putin was keen to avoid a mass mobilization?
Absolutely. This always carried a political risk. He knew that there is a difference between sending people in to fight who have signed a contract saying that they want to fight for the money, and then forcing young men, just because they have done military service at one time and developed particular skills, to go and fight even if they don't want to. We are now in a situation where we will be seeing that. And it's not only just young men, it is men up to 50, 55.
And then we've seen, and again, World War II, different situation, different scenario. Russia could have very well have been an Axis power in World War II had Hitler not double-crossed Stalin. But there were the Russians that had to defend Stalingrad in World War II that were conscripted. Again, different situation. Understandably, Russia had to defend its land against the Nazis. So that's completely get that point. But already remembering from history that anybody that tried to flee, any conscripts that tried to flee mobilization or flee, they were killed. Like, you weren't sent to the gulag, you were killed right then and there by the commander of the unit, and in the conscript unit, you were shot if you tried to leave. And keep in mind, that's going to be a lot of these anti-war protesters, citizens within Ukraine that are in Russian-occupied territories. They're going to have to go and fight against their will.
They have the particular skills, will be sent into Ukraine. And I think that is why they were hesitant to take this step for a very long time. And that is why Ukraine and many countries in the West say this is an act of desperation on the part of Vladimir Putin rather than any signal of strength.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. More of a cope than it is a signal of strength. Here's Russia's losses as of the 21st. From Ukraine's armed forces. They have 55,000 losses, over 55,000 losses in troop numbers. They've lost over 2,200 tanks, about 5,000 APVs, nearly 1,400 artillery units, almost 300 planes, a little over 200 helicopters. You can see the numbers. They've lost a good amount, and a lot of these pieces of equipment and assets to the Russian military are among their best. So they're sending brand new, not poorly trained troops, equipment that's likely being hurried across the factory line. I'm wondering if there's going to be any faulty pieces of equipment in protest, like at the factories of the people that are going to have to build new equipment for these conscripts that are going to be sent into Ukraine, at like the factory level, some sabotage on some of these equipment pieces that are being created. I had a funny image to show, and I cannot find it now. Kind of simulating what maybe it's on my timeline. Let's go to the list here. So showing it's like a cartoon of what the Russians going to be sent into Ukraine is going to be like. I don't think I can find it though. But here's just nonstop evidence of the police arresting protesters in Russia. Here's a look at the border between Georgia and Russia, where thousands of Russians are fleeing the country after Putin declared summons for military service within Ukraine. They're trying to get the hell up out of there. Now, just imagine if they... No, it's hard to even say that too. But that is the Russians that are fleeing, the mass amounts of Russians that are fleeing Russia for Georgia and other countries. Okay, more on that. So here's from our Discord server. Definitely join our Discord server. We have some videos that were shared to it, and we have the Orc Hunter Discord server. It's actually the Mercado Media Discord server, but we have the Orc Hunters section that's all focused on the Ukraine war, like a discussion thread, so you guys can chat away here about anything. And we have this video. Thank you. Almost forgot that. Thank you to Danny. He was live. Nikki in the protest in St. Petersburg. Let me see, easy over there.
Of my
I hope he's okay. He was live. This is Nikki Proshin. He's been doing some coverage within Russia, talking to some civilians, similar to like the 1420 YouTube channel, and he went live from St. Petersburg during the protests and events.
Guys in front, like behind me right now, they were shouting "No to war." So apparently I will change my microphone direction so you can hear and see what people are saying. Wait a bit, I'm changing my microphone direction.
Again, credit to Nick. This is a live stream when he was in St. Petersburg.
Давай беги, пойдем.
Have a good night.
You too.
Yeah, so that was Natasha's from Russia. Natasha's Russia, I mean. You can find her on TikTok or Instagram. She makes quite educational and nice videos about life in Russia, but not on YouTube, on TikTok. Yeah, so we saw quite a few people shouting like "No to war," which means, which sounds in Russian like "Нет войне." And we are going to follow these people. I'm feeling a little bit inconvenient to actually hold my camera like this. I cannot see the screen, so let's change it. Let's change it again. And I'll change the direction of my camera, I mean the direction of my microphone again.
Was that at the 18-minute mark?
Faster, just to find follow the first part of this group that was louder. It's like, yeah, just let's go. I'm glad they're speaking up. Yes and no. I'm glad that people are speaking up, but I honestly don't believe that it will change anything. But one thing it changed for sure for people. They see that they are not alone. People who go outdoors to show their disagreement, they see that they are not only like few people with some kind of, I don't know, strange or weird point of view. They see hundreds and thousands other people.
Doesn't sound like freedom to me.
Although today, these grannies, these ladies are talking about Ukraine. Hello.
Hello. Нет войне. Нет войне.
Yes, indeed. Нет войне means no to war, no war. Exactly. And did you
now
check
that
out
Putin's announced mobilization, will Russians be punished for saying war now?
this lady manicure, like... Вам там кричат уважуха. Respect. Yeah, that was epic. The part with fingernails. Nikki, don't expose faces. It's like, guys, it's not a matter of my channel or my videos to expose faces. If people get in the center of St. Petersburg, we are all being filmed by cameras. So it's like, no matter if I film anybody or...
That's what everyone told me when I was filming the protests in the US. You're filming faces, blah, blah, blah. What you mean? Like, yeah, St. Petersburg has cameras everywhere too. So does the US. You're on the camera. You want to do something, you're on the camera too. So it's like, it doesn't matter. We're all on the camera right now. Sorry, that's relatable to me.
We are all being filmed on cameras today. Like, just have a look. This, that,
everywhere.
Here it is. And every single corner has a lot of cameras, basically. And I want to say hi and greetings to 8,500 people. That is the biggest amount of live stream viewers I've ever had on my channel, but I understand the importance of this topic, and today, yeah. Greetings and best wishes from St. Petersburg, Russia.
He's shook. He does a great job, though. You can tell he's nervous and scared right now, though.
There's also a lot of things to describe and to say about these tiny little details of this partial mobilization.
По-русски говори.
По-русски.
Ты слышишь меня? По-русски говори.
That's what y'all were talking about, referencing?
That was not the best experience, guys.
Guy approached him and hit him and told him to speak Russian.
So, what happened right now? I don't know actually what to think about that. I might think that Big Brother is watching. I might think that that was just a weirdo from Russia. Yeah. I don't know if I caught this on camera, but basically what happened right now was a really weird Russian man, I don't know if he's 60s or 50s, who say something like, speak Russian, and didn't say anything else. Just kind of personal assault, but that was, yeah.
That's the guy that assaulted him is the energy of the volunteers that are being sent into Ukraine and the types of people that are volunteering to go fight in the war. See if we can find them quick.
Mobilization.
Trying to see if I can find them, sneak up on them quick.
My channel, but I understand the importance of this topic, and today, yeah. Greetings and best wishes from St. Petersburg, Russia.
It's the guy behind him in the suit.
So a lot of things to describe and to say about these tiny little details of this partial mobilization.
По-русски говори.
По-русски.
Ты слышишь меня? По-русски говори.
It's like he's in a suit behind him. You can see him follow him right here.
Hi and greetings to 8,500 people. That is the biggest amount of...
See, he was tailing him for a while there. Could be an FSB agent, could just be... Oh, he's confused too. What a shit situation.
Speak Russian. And once again, there are two ideas in my head. That first, he might be just a weird Russian, a random guy that somehow has some problem with his mental state, or that might be something different, although I don't think so. By the way, guys...
No, that's not him. It was a guy further back. Okay, hold on a second. It was further back. Hold on a second. It wasn't that one?
Yeah, that was...
So it's not this one. It's not this guy.
It was epic. The filmed by cameras. And hi and greetings to my channel. Best wishes from St. Petersburg, Russia. There's also a lot of things to describe and to say about these tiny little details of this partial mobilization.
Oh, okay. No, it's a guy that comes off the side. He comes out of the building right here.
This partial.
There's a guy right here, right here.
По-русски.
With glasses right there. I'm spending too much time on this.
Partial.
I'm trying to see what the dude looks like.
По-русски.
Glasses. His glasses on.
По-русски.
Nah. I'm spending too much time on it now. But we found he has the glasses on in the corner right there. Hits him, tells him to speak Russian. Okay. I thought I would be able to see more out of that. Let's continue.
Like, I see some difference. Oh, all right. So basically they decided to change the direction and I spontaneously appeared in the middle of this stuff.
Oh dear.
You can hear they shouting the same thing, basically saying no to war. I don't know guys, what do you think? Better to stay and wait until they pass? Or go to the, I don't know, island and cross the canal?
Not sure if he's shook right now. Doesn't know if he wants to sit next to the group because that group is going to be gulagged here in like very shortly. He doesn't want to be gulagged. So he's making mental decisions right now. Do I stick with the protest here and follow it and like be around it? Or do I go to the other side of the channel and maybe I can film it from the other side?
I'll shift my microphone again so you can hear the people. So guys, you saw the amount of people who was walking this street. At the daytime, that's a really beautiful touristic place with some... Can you see me, right? You can see me. At daytime, it's a really beautiful central place with lots of tourists. Oh, some channels, TV channels walking here. With really beautiful cathedrals around, like behind there's Kazan Cathedral, incredible. In front of where people are going, that is church. How do you say that in English? Spilled Blood Cathedral, something like that. Whatever. We'll just follow the crowd for a little bit while, and I'll turn right afterwards. And there's a tiny, nice park over there. We can stay, we can sit, we can chat for a little bit longer. Yeah, and I see 15,000 people watching right now. Crazy, enormous amount of people. I want to say greetings from St. Petersburg, Russia. And if you're watching me for the first time, let me introduce myself. My name is Nikki. I live in this city. I am from Russia. And on this channel, I basically show my daily life in Russia, at least this year. And before I was making a lot of videos about culture and Russian food and so on. But right now, our daily life quite changed. And that's what we have.
And this is like the only way that we can get a look. And it's kind of like we can't even understand what's happening in Russia without these YouTubers and vloggers that are doing the best they can to like toe that line, right? Because you don't want them to get thrown into the gulag, or even worse, conscripted and having to go fight in Ukraine for Russia. So they're like towing a line in a sense. This is the only way that we get to gauge what it's like in Russia, because obviously we can't, from RT or any of the Russian media sources, that we can't do that at all. We can only watch those ironically to figure out where the ideological narrative is going. But in terms of what's actually happening in Russia, you can only really learn that information from these vloggers.
Subscribe, like this channel or video.
Yeah, Moscow Times does a good job. I agree with that.
Yeah, be nice, viewers. Be nice, commenters. And also, if you like what I do with my channel, you can support me on Patreon or YouTube membership. And I want to say thank you, big thank you to people who are sending some donations here right during the live stream. Real appreciate. So, what I see right now, people passed from over there right to the spilled blood cathedral, still shouting no to war, something like that. There are some people watching all around the place. The tourists are making pictures with that guy, which is so ridiculous. Like, you see, the guys are having fun while other guys are saying like no to war stuff. Yeah. And I think we're gonna go, look, the guys are going there, protesters, and we are going over there just to have conversation. Yeah.
So like a regular everyday life going on while the protesters are doing their thing.
The chat is crazy fast today. I honestly never experienced this crazy chat. I also never...
So more from that. That's, again, credit to Nicky Proshin. I'm subscribed to his channel. I just watched one of his videos a day or so ago. Yeah, I visited the capital of Russia. I first found his channel on this video. And then here he is live streaming in St. Petersburg. So this is Nicky Proshin, does a great job, just like 1420 YouTube channel does a wonderful job with their videos. A couple of those protest videos that I found within Moscow and St. Petersburg. This is an idea of what they look like outside of that live stream. So there's some protest video. Here's another one from Alex Kokachev. Moscow, Russia. The police are detaining protesters against the mobilizations. This was a little under 12 hours ago. Could be more video coming out the next day. So the Russian police arresting the protesters. Here's more from that. Streets of Moscow in Russia. Yeah, I had a couple more of those videos, and now I just cannot locate them. But let's go back to the Mercado Media Discord server and a couple of the other videos here. Here's the alligator. No, let's go. Oh, that's why I was in the discussion tab. Here it is. This is what I've been looking for like the last hour or so. This is mobilization in Russia. This is how they're coming to find you. Found him in the refrigerator, trying to hide from mobilization in Russia. Thank you to the Orc Hunters Discord. I've been looking for that one. Couldn't find it. Here's video. This is going to be the prisoner exchange that's been taking place from the commanders from the Azovstal plant with some Russian commanders. An exchange taking place also with this exchange over the 2 Americans that were captured. And I'm going to get into that in a second. I need to look it up. This is all coming to me right now. I didn't have it planned. But these are the commanders that have been freed from Russian captivity. So Ukrainian commanders being freed. See if I can find more on that quick. I didn't have it ready. We have more in the Discord though. I had more of those videos ready to go, but apparently not. Here's more from the protesters in Moscow, in the Russian city, in Krasnodar. A police van packed with anti-mobilization protesters broke down. So the Gulag bus broke. Damn, they can't even arrest the people properly.
Очень забавно. Автозак с пленными сломался.
Dang.
Будьте любезны, пожалуйста, отойдите.
A bus full of anti-war protesters broke down in Krasnodar. Thank you to the videos, to the Discord server. Let's continue. We saw that video already. A couple more. Let's scroll up to the top here. Rob Lee must be taking a couple days off. Understandably, he's been going 6 months straight, so there's nothing on Rob Lee's timeline. So got to rely on the Orc Hunters in the Discord to share some video. Here's from XK on our Discord server, shared column of Ukrainian T-64 BV tanks in the Kharkiv region. This was posted on the 21st as Ukraine's counteroffensives are still sweeping eastward. So Ukraine's counteroffensive sweeping eastward. There's some military activity happening within Kharkiv. Some more from the Discord. And again, the link to the Discord is in the description. This is shared into our video clips timeline, in which you can find all types of videos shared all day long. The blow was inflicted in a building in Noviadar in Lugansk region, where the Russian military was located. So it looks like a Ukrainian strike on a Russian military base. That looks like a pretty massive strike there in Luhansk. As Ukrainian artillery is getting closer to that front line.
Да тихо, блядь, стой. Новоайдар. 21 сентября Новоайдар. Охуеть.
Dang.
Вот это да.
Hi Mars in the chat.
Там он еще куда-то. Охуеть. Я в шоке. Блять, руки аж трясутся. Это рядом с домом, через вот дорога. И вон оно прилетело, вот оно здание. Сейчас, вот оно. Еба, вот это просто вон оно прилетело туда. Охуеть. Да ну нахуй.
Dang. Massive plume of smoke from a building in the Luhansk region where the Russian military has been, or excuse me, was located. Thank you for that video in the Discord. Here's another one from the Mercado Media Discord server. In this video, you can see the work of the Ukrainian self-propelled guns Pion. So these are some Ukrainian Pion artillery pieces. I think these are 2S3s. They're much louder than that. The sound is pretty muffled in the video, but that gives you an idea of what those look like. Here's in this video, you can see the work of the Ukrainian M270s. Multiple launch rocket systems. So I know the HIMARS gets lots of love, but these are the M270 multiple launch rocket systems on track vehicles. Dang, I was hoping that was going to build a little more, but that's the M270 system being used in Ukraine from Ukrainian troops. We saw the traffic jam, saw the people being the bus of protesters broke down. Russia is a terrorist. Police beat women against Putin's. Okay, don't really want to see protesters brutalized. You've seen lots of that. I've seen lots of it in person and in video. But here's an idea of how the police are treating the protesters, the anti-war protesters in Russia. Free speech is not a thing within the country. So you see a protester brutalized by the Russian police protesting the war. We saw Zelensky's speech. We saw, what do we got here? Oh, this is the cleaning up Russian trash.
So we're here.
Let's go to these. This is a TikTok video. I haven't used TikTok in a while. How do we make it full screen?
So we're here in, what town are we in?
I guess I can't make it full screen.
Huh? Balaklia? We're here in Balaklia, and they recently went through and did some demining operations before anybody was allowed in here. This is a little bit of what they have. Looks like they have some artillery and some rockets here. And looks like we have some RPGs here. We have the grenades there. Looks like this bad boy is an anti-tank mine. Yeah, these got your stuff all
still packaged.
Here. This is the actual launcher to launch the RPG. That's a explosive tip, I think.
I could watch. Oh man, 420 friendly street. 1 second, chat. 420 friendly. Oh man, that one got me by surprise. But I could watch Russian equipment being captured to lo-fi. That could be like an ASMR thing. That could be a whole genre. Watching Russian military equipment, vehicles, ammo, gear, rockets being taken to lo-fi. We need more of that.
I really don't know what this is, but it doesn't look good.
Yeah, like an unboxing video.
RP4. It's a canister.
I got a canister, so you're just going through. I got another one here. Got a couple of them. I think this is the same channel. Does this channel do all lo-fi to this? Because I'm definitely gonna follow this TikTok.
Їхня розгрузка. РГД, да, а вот там дальше F1 с запалами.
Couldn't see what those were. Hold on. What was that? What was in the box? What's in the box? What's in the fucking box? Were those medals? I can't. Why is this so small? We're just zoomed in like this. There we go. I got it on 100. No, I got it on 300% right now, so we can see this tiny little video on TikTok. That's so potato. Is that Mancala? They got a Mancala board in there. Grenades, maybe. Honestly, I think those are the medals that the little medal award ceremony shows that they keep putting on. Oh well, it's Ukraine's now. Doesn't matter. Don't matter, it's Ukraine's now.
Гранаты, да? Гранаты, да. Вот это F1 без запала.
Those are grenades.
Лимонка.
Oh, here we go.
Тоже видишь с упаковочным листом. Подпись. 19 рік, 20.07.19.
The Krabby Patty secret formula.
Такое свежее, не открывалось еще. И вот он у нас. Запало отдельно.
Oh wow. In the packaging still. Man, thank you for the gifts, Russia.
Шмели, РПГ они оставили.
А ці тубуси це теж РПГ, так?
Это?
Да.
Honestly, you know what? I think nobody supplied the Ukrainians better than the Russians, man. The Russians are complaining about NATO supplying Ukraine with weapons. What about themselves? These acts of goodwill are just, they continue, they are one of the biggest suppliers for the Ukrainian military. What they talking about NATO doing all that shit. Look at all the equipment that Russia's given to Ukraine. Oh my goodness. I think Russia might be supplying Ukraine more than NATO is.
А оце що за зброя?
Это утес. Тут пороховые заряды. Тоже нормально. Стративые шашки.
Ooh, what's in this one? It's like some more C4. Those are grenades. Mines.
Так, это да.
Those are those pressure mines. We watched Civdiv. Shout out to the Civdiv YouTube channel and all the work he's done. Where he, him and his teammate laid a mine down, and you saw that process, and that whole thing gave me anxiety. They got to pull the pin, and then you got to push down, and there's like a sound, and fuck that, whatever. I could never have been a combat engineer. Fuck that.
62.
Скажіть, це установка під стугну, так?
Да. Это под стугну у нас тоже ставили. Заказки.
Wow.
Можно посмотреть.
Brand new. The box ain't even open. They're freaking MREs. Is it from 2015?
Скажи, скільки тут взагалі боєкомплект?
That was vibes.
Це так, якщо...
I wish the lo-fi would have kept going, but then they had their MREs there at the end. Damn, I had to zoom in so far to be able to even see that. I don't know why they don't have full screen video for computer. Everybody's on TikTok. I don't know how they're screwing around. So thank you to everybody that sent the video to the Mercado Media Discord server, definitely join that. Link is in the description, or just wait for the chat bot. Russian mobile, and we'll actually play that at the very end. Let's go to the Ukraine war video report now that we did the Mercado Media Discord server, and everybody and all the orc hunters that share a video into it. And if you're not a part of that, definitely join. We're getting more and more people into the server. So here's from the Reddit. The mass action against mobilization, which Russia's managed, takes place in St. Petersburg. This was during the daytime. It's like niet, or niet my yet, or niet by yet. I can't even understand. Or niet by niet. No to war. Protests against the mobilization in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Is the second word pronounced with a B or a M or or a P? I know yet's no, but the middle word. It's voin, so it's with a V. I was wrong. Okay. And so the V, okay, for English speakers, like a V. Net vine, like vine, is like that. Net like vine, like the platform. Is that the middle word? Is that how to pronounce it? All right, so that's the protesters within the major cities in Russia that stepped out to protest after Putin announced the partial mobilization of 300,000 reservists. You got another influx of protests, people leaving Russia. Looks like more people are trying to leave now than they did during the invasion, the initial invasion. So it's niet vine yet. So am I gonna have to wear a yellow vest soon? If America ever goes authoritarian, I'm gonna have to wear a yellow vest out there, huh? If the United States ever goes that direction, God forbid. Just a reminder that Ukrainians kept on protesting even when they were getting murdered on the streets. Don't give Russians any credit for protesting tonight, because that's what they'll do, what they always do, protest once and go hiding for months. Oh, I don't know. Am I going to get taken down for this? Oh, this is the Maidan protests. Okay, well, we can go down memory lane. This is what I was referring to. I wish I would have seen this video so I could have a video to refer to. But this is Yanukovych's response when Yanukovych was the president, and how his police force responded to the Ukrainians that were protesting what had been taking place within Ukraine. This was in 2014.
The truce didn't last long. This morning, Kiev again awoke to the sound of gunfire.
Big difference between the people of Ukraine and the people of Russia for the motivating factors here.
A small group of protesters was trying to retake ground. They were met by sniper fire with deadly results.
By the way, this specific event was what sparked the West to start paying attention in 2014. Yanukovych's police force that was sniping the protesters, talking about it was just a NATO provocation from the beginning, is just horseshit. Like this, almost like you can like be like, this specific event was one of the biggest motivating factors for Western countries to be like, yo, what the fuck? People were getting sniped on this day. Killed. If you haven't watched, damn it, what is it, on The Winter on Fire on Netflix, it's free on YouTube. If you don't have a Netflix account, you can watch the entire thing for free on YouTube.
Well, she's just said that there are 6 dead people up there, not just injured, dead. They say they've been hit by snipers. Some of the demonstrators pulled back, dragging their injured comrades to safety under a hail of bullets fired by government forces.
That is the corrupt Kyiv regime that everyone keeps referring to, or the Russian trolls that will say that the Kyiv regime is what it is. It was when the Russians had control over it, and when they had a puppet government in control of the country. This is when it was corrupt.
Well, the fighting has moved now up from the square. The protesters seem to be trying to retake some of the territory that was taken off them by the police just a day or so ago. These are the injured, and the bangs we're hearing, that's real gunfire.
You believe this was only 8 years ago?
The nearby Hotel Ukraine, where we and other journalists were staying, turned into a makeshift triage centre. One of the first to be brought in was this man.
Where's it gone in? Is there an exit wound?
He'd taken a bullet through the thigh.
You see?
Another lay on the floor of the lobby, bleeding profusely from his foot. The priest's services were, in this case, not required. Both of these men survived. We left the hotel and ventured up towards the new front line. The majority of the gunfire seemed to be coming from police lines, but not all of it. From one of the upper
No, Garrett, that's the garbage one. That's not the right. It's Winter on Fire.
windows of the hotel, a shot rang out. Up there, okay, yeah, our hotel. That window, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th row from the left, second from the top, one that was open. I saw the shooter. He was wearing one of the protesters' green helmets. The number of people injured today must have reached well into the hundreds. They just kept on coming, some still defiant as they were stretchered off.
So this, again, just reflective, and I referenced this a little earlier in the stream. I wish I would have known it was in the Reddit. I would have played it as soon as I had referenced it. But just the big difference between the Ukrainians stepping up to standing up to their authoritarian regime, and they were done. They were done with it, and you can see what the response was. And then you got the Russians that have protested literally twice since the first night of the invasion, and then now, and then they're done, and then they go back into hiding or try to flee. This is just highlighting the differences between the Ukrainians and the Russians, and also why Ukraine is winning now. The evidence of Ukraine's morale was back in 2014 when we saw this. And yeah, it's Winter on Fire, Ukraine's fight for freedom. It's free. Go watch it on YouTube. I can't stream it because it is copyrighted content, so I can't like play it on stream, but it's on YouTube for free if you want to watch it if you don't have a Netflix account.
At the same time, fresh protesters came forward to man the new barricades. We broke through police lines right here, says Taras. It was our initiative. They're unpredictable, so are we.
That's the Maidan, that's the square. We were watching it on live stream for days when the invasion began. Doesn't look anything like this, but it did during the Maidan revolution.
The mayor of Kiev today announced he too was joining the opposition, and he invited his police force to join him. It's not clear if any have taken him up on that offer. But in other parts of Ukraine, especially the west, there are reports that security forces are refusing to follow orders to crack down on the protesters. You have to be careful, of course, with comparisons, but we have seen this happen in other countries. Peaceful demonstrations that eventually turn violent. Look at that up there. That was the headquarters of the protesters until it was ransacked, firebombed, and now it's smoking remains. This is no longer just a protest movement. This is becoming a rebellion. And the question now is how much further both sides are prepared to push this.
Damn, y'all haven't seen, so, oh my goodness. I guess I didn't realize how many of y'all really just don't know how this all began, which is, I guess, good. We're 6 months in. I guess no time like the present. Definitely your homework is to go watch that documentary and come back to tomorrow's stream with at least some background knowledge of this, and we can maybe dive into some more. But this is where it all really began. Russia's reasoning for the war starting is just garbage. It was all due to Yanukovych, and the people of Ukraine wanted to join the European Union. Everything was on track for Ukraine to be a part of the EU. They were going to join, and then Vladimir Putin came in and was like, nope, actually, you're not doing that. You're going to come in, you're going to join our security guarantees instead, which then the people of Ukraine and Kyiv protested in the streets, in which we saw at the beginning of this BBC report were sniped and shot by the police, which definitely, I mean, I've been not shot by lethal rounds, but I've been shot by less than lethals, and that is definitely a way to, it's not a way to calm the situation. It's only going to make it worse, but they actually were killing protesters. And then more and more people came and they rallied the country, and the West got involved at that point even more so, because they were like, whoa, holy fuck, like the government's police is out there killing the protesters for wanting to join the EU like they were supposed to, because they were supposed to do this. Just go watch Winter on Fire and then come back. That's your homework.
This afternoon, 2 armoured personnel carriers were parked just beyond the new front line. The Interior Minister said police would be issued with firearms. On Independence Square, protesters were busy clearing the debris left behind in the areas newly captured from the authorities. Judging by the hundreds of cartridges they found, there's already no shortage of guns. We visited the office of the mayor, the one who said he'd defected to the opposition. He was nowhere to be seen, but the place is full of demonstrators, resting, recharging their batteries, waiting for the next battle. These people, too, are armed.
37.
37, да?
30, рівно 30.
Sergei told us his men had captured 30 police officers this morning, confiscating their weapons and ammunition. His colleague Mariam told me how he'd helped to seize the officers. They got a beating from us, he said. I'm not going to lie. But then we delivered them to the protest authorities. They'll decide their fate. I asked Mariam and his comrades whether they were worried that protest was turning to conflict. They all agreed this is already war. We tried to find the captured policemen in several government buildings occupied by different protest groups. They all turned us away. Some were less friendly than others.
Don't shout! Don't shout!
Do these men still qualify as demonstrators, or should we start to call them rebels? That depends on whether some sort of peace can still be salvaged from these past 3 days of carnage.
Okay, and then there's some graphic video there, so I'm gonna skip through it. So those were some of the protesters that were killed during this revolution.
One woman told me, a little over 20 years ago, Ukraine gained its independence peacefully. Little over 20 years ago.
So then it shows the protesters also left. That's a BBC report, but again, if you haven't watched the Ukraine, the Winter on Fire, definitely go watch that on YouTube or Netflix so you can get some background and understand how all of this started, because it didn't just start with Russia's invasion. It didn't just start with Putin's invasion. This has been going since 2014. And go and watch that. Footage from auto racks in St. Petersburg in which 30 people are being detained.
Так. Ну что?
Hey, on their way to the gulag.
Мы в автозаке. Я в автозаке с прелестными людьми. Очень милые. Очень милые, прелестные ребята здесь. И я с ними тоже еду куда-то, не знаю куда. Да, вот. Нас схватили, повязали и куда-то везут.
So Russians being detained for protesting the announced mobilization. Ukraine returned the defenders of Mariupol from Russian city captivity from the Azov battalion. Here's the freed commanders. No, the video's on you. Like the whole movie is on you. Like, oh yeah. Do I need to share the movie into the Discord server? I'll share the video. I'll share the movie into the Discord server so y'all can watch it. Here, like the entire movie. I can't play it because of copyright for me, but here it is. The entire long film right here. Copy. I'm gonna share it into the Discord right now. So. Here we went through that. We saw that video. Russian Volknomat on recruitment office. How officials hunt, capture, and deliver by force young Russian males.
На ваших экранах совместный рейд сотрудников военкомата и участкового полицейского. Они выявляют уклонистов. То, что дверь вообще открыли, говорят сотрудники, большая удача. Обычно или всегда закрыто, или мальчика нет дома, как могло бы быть сейчас. Но юноша дома, по словам соседей, и от сотрудников уже не уйти. Правда, причина всегда найдется.
Одеваемся и едем в военкомат. Расписывайся, что ты сегодня должен явиться, и я тебя жду. Расписывайся.
Не поеду туда.
А почему ты не поедешь?
Его будет там инвалид, если я посижу.
Собираемся и едем в военкомат.
Собирайся.
Расписывайся.
Сотрудники военкомата говорят, что причины ребята придумывают самые разные. В разгар пандемии самой частой отговоркой стала фраза «я заражен» или «я контактировал». Однако и таких, как Даниил, тоже могут доставить в военкомат. С начала осеннего призыва, то есть с 1 октября, поймали уже 30 человек.
У нас более 500 человек уклоняется. Мы все проводим постоянную работу по розыску, оповещению и принятию дальнейшего решения, что же с ним сделать. За уклонение от прохождения военной службе предусмотрено 2 вида наказания. Это административное наказание в виде штрафа до 3000.
So you get an administrative fine of $50.
И уголовная ответственность.
Criminal liability fine up to 200,000 rubles, which is 3,500. or 2 years in prison.
Гражданина это штраф в размере до 200 тысяч рублей или либо лишение свободы на 2 года.
Теперь Даниила...
So again, those that are wealthy will be able to get out of that, right? They can pay that, but the poorest of the country are not going to be able to afford that.
Для прохождения медкомиссии.
They can't afford to evade conscription and just pay the fines.
На работу военкомата пандемия тоже повлияла. Живые очереди у врачей можно увидеть только на архивных кадрах. Теперь не больше 10 человек, контроль температуры и средства защиты. Военный комиссар уверяет, что в армии заразиться новым вирусом еще сложнее, чем на гражданке. Но молодых ребят явно пугает не здоровая атмосфера, а год, проведенный в однотонной форме и неудобных берцах. Валерий Седов, Михаил Лазуткин, телекомпания «Город».
So that's the Russians being conscripted. Not everyone has to go to war. Alleged call from a journalist to son of... Is this on?
Аукционе Николай, сын Дмитрия Пескова. Здравствуйте, Николай.
Let's read what this... So what is this video? We got another $50 super chat from Martin. It says normal for Russia. Thank you for the $50 bomb there. Not everyone has to go to war. Alleged call from journalist to son of Putin's spokesman. What is this about?
Аукционе Николай, сын Дмитрия Пескова. Здравствуйте, Николай.
Это кто?
Это военный комиссариат с вами разговаривает. Вы сейчас можете говорить?
Могу.
Добрый день. Да, давайте не будем швырять трубки, как это вы делали в прошлый раз. Значит, Николай, вопрос...
Зачем вы мне звоните, еще мне говорите, подождите?
Потому что, господин Николай Песков, я могу с вами так разговаривать. Значит, я почему вам звоню? Вам сегодня была отправлена повестка, в том числе и госуслуги, и на бумаге она к вам приходила, и вы пока еще не отозвались. А там был указан номер, по которому вы должны перезвонить, и завтра в 10 утра явиться в военный комиссариат. Во-первых, почему вы не перезвонили? Во-вторых, придете ли вы завтра в военный комиссариат? В 10 утра мы вас ждем.
Вы, 10 утра, естественно, завтра я не приеду.
Так.
Вы должны понимать, если вы знаете, что я господин Песков,
да.
Насколько это не совсем правильно, чтобы я там находился.
Угу.
Короче, я буду это решать я буду это решать на другом уровне, если это не надо.
Oh, so the caller's trolling as the call. Okay. So this is okay. So he's trolling the media person here, saying that okay, it's a fake call. I get it. All right. Little humor, trying to throw off the media people. Potential new Ukrainian winged night vision drone.
Так, тренировочки начались. Трепещите орки. У нас уже боевые словы начинаются.
On the grenade. Go and drop that on a Russian position real quick. Even the birds fight for Ukraine. Even the birds fighting. We saw that. That's the Ukrainians advancing in Kharkiv region. Defenders of Mariupol to the bitter end. Wow, I remember we were tracking that for a month this summer and watching the slow demise of the city of Mariupol. Saw this is like a highlight reel of a lot of that. And there's the defenders. Yeah, they fought hard to try to defend Mariupol to the very end, and then they were held up in the Azovstal steel plant and fought to the very last moment where they had to give up. So all in all, y'all, I mean the Russian military has announced the full mobilization of, or not full, but partial mobilization of their military, their reserve units, 300,000 of them to go fight in Ukraine. It's nothing right now to be of concern. The Ukrainian military certainly isn't concerned. Those units are not going to be trained. They're not going to be equipped. The best Russian military is already come and gone. They still have the Wagner group and the Wagner forces, but even the Wagner units are now recruiting in prisons, and like not the best type of quality of individual you want fighting a war. So even though Russia announces mobilization, it's an escalation. It's a new phase of the war. There's gonna be some escalated things happening, but in terms of Ukrainian morale and the will to continue fighting for the land in Ukraine, that's not going to stop. Ukrainian military is still going with their counteroffensives. They're still hitting Russian targets in the south and Kherson. They're still advancing in the east across the Oskol River, and we're going to continue tracking this until it's done, and the Russian military leaves Ukraine. We're going to continue providing coverage of this war until the end. I'm Andy Mercado from Mercado Media. If you enjoy this content, please leave a like on the video. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. Make sure you're following us on Facebook. I'm going to be live on my gaming channel after this live stream on Snack Squad TV. Shout out to our Snack Squad community. I'm going to be streaming some more Last of Us Part 2. That's still going to happen, I promise. I know I'm late because we had just extra content to go through tonight, but I'm going to be live on my Snack Squad TV gaming channel on YouTube. If you're on Facebook, come on over to YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, just hang out in the chat and I will redirect you to the gaming live stream. Shout out to all of our members of the channel. Shout out to all of our supporters of the Facebook page. Grab that supporter badge to support me and continue going. I don't have any sponsors at this time, so everybody that sends super chats and super stickers and stars on Facebook and just supports that way just helps me keep going. But if don't feel obligated, if that's not reasonable for you right now, your support with a like, with a subscribe, and with a follow is plenty. Thank you guys so much for all the support, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Take care. one more time. One more time. Russian mobilization. They're gonna come find you.